morning. Thanks for coming out today. My name is Brent Jedd. I'm the STS-115 crew commander, and I hope you can tell by the smiles on our faces that we're very, very happy to finally be here in Florida to start the launch countdown. It's been a long road for the crew, but not just for us. The teams here in Florida that have prepared Atlantis, as well as preparing the P-3-4 power module. And then it's been a long road for the flight control team as well back in Houston, as they have meticulously planned this mission and now are prepared to execute it along with us and the station crew on orbit. I can tell you that I think those folks are probably more anxious and looking forward to the flight at least as much as we are, in some cases more. Now, there's been a lot of talk in the press lately about NASA being back, and I think we would all certainly agree with that talk. But we have a saying back in Texas, it's time to walk the walk. Speaking for myself and my fellow crewmates, I can assure you that we are ready for the challenge, and we're anxious to restart the station assembly sequence. All we need is a little good weather on Sunday, and we'll be out of here. A couple of the crew members would like to make some comments first. Let me introduce the entire crew, and then we'll have two more crew members say a few words. To my left is Mission Specialist Dan Burbank. Next to him, Shuttle Pilot Chris Ferguson. To my right is Mission Specialist Heidi Stephanician-Piper, Mission Specialist Joe Tanner, and last but not least, Mission Specialist Steve McLean from the Canadian Space Agency. So, Joe, I think you'd like to say a few words.
I just want to say thank you to the thousands of men and women, past and present, here at Kennedy Space Center, many of them who are personal friends, and across the country have worked for years tirelessly to make this space program possible. When we climb aboard Atlantis on Sunday, we do so with confidence that the vehicle is ready, prepared by the best technicians, engineers, and managers in the business. We just thank you all for allowing us to play a little part in your life work. God bless you.
Je vais parler en français en premier. Ça fait 4 ans que le charge utile P3, P4 que nous allons transporter en orbite avec nous. Ça fait 6 ans, je dois dire, 6 ans. Et l'Atlantis, notre navette, ça fait 4 ans en préparation. Et puis nous, notre équipage, nous nous entraînons environ 4 ans et demi aussi. Et finalement, dimanche, on va marcher vers la part de tir. On va lancer dans l'espace. Et pour moi, le fait de prendre cette marche comme ça, c'est un peu comme une entrée dans un stade olympique. Plusieurs pays y participent. Et nos amis et nos familles occupent les premiers sièges du stade. Et ainsi, je vous encourage toutes et tous de nous regarder à travers le STS-115 et à surveiller ce qu'on fait chaque jour, parce que je vous le garantis que ça va être très excitant. Et avec une équipe comme ça, puis aussi au dévouement de l'équipage au sol, je vous promets une médaille d'or. So, it's been 6 years since our payload has been at Kennedy here. It's been four years, I think, since Atlantis has been in preparation. And for us as a crew, it's 4.5 years as well. And finally, on Sunday, we're going to get to walk out to the pad for the launch. And for me, walking out to the pad on Sunday will be much like walking into an Olympic stadium for your athletic event. Many countries will be participating in a spirit of international cooperation, and our family and our friends who believe in what we do will be in the front seats of the stadium. So I invite you all to watch what we do over the next week. It will be exciting. Watch what we do every day. It's complex what we do. It's not easy. But with a team like this that I've been working with for the last 4 years, and especially with the focus and dedication of the teams on the ground, I promise you we'll bring home a gold medal.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
keep up with this way, Bill.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our STS-115 countdown status briefing here on launch minus 3 days. I have with me today to present activities Steve Payne, our NASA test director, Robbie Ashley, who is the STS-115 payload manager, and Kathy Winters, our shuttle weather officer.
Good morning.
And we'll begin with opening statements from each of these, starting with Steve.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm very pleased to be here today to provide you the STS-115 launch countdown status for the upcoming mission of the Space Shuttle Atlantis to the International Space Station. Atlantis is in excellent shape, and we're on track with preparations for Sunday's launch to bring the P3 and P4 thrust to the orbiting space station and return her crews safely home. The flight crews, you heard earlier, is arriving today at about 11:15, and I know that they're as excited as we are to be launching this week. They've spent the last few years training for this mission, and they're eager to carry it out. We are currently tracking no issues in our preparations at this point. The orbiter's aft compartment was closed out yesterday, and the payload bay should be closing here shortly. Our preparations to begin the countdown are nearly complete. The call to stations for countdown is this afternoon, 5:30 p.m. today, and our countdown clock should begin counting at 6 p.m. We'll begin shortly after that with checkouts of our avionics systems, and then begin preparations for loading the onboard reactions for the electrical power generating system. And that should take place on Friday between 2 p.m. and 10 p.m. The checkout of the orbiter and ground communications network takes place around 2 p.m. on Saturday. Our rotating service structure is scheduled to be retracted at just after 7 p.m. on Saturday. The next morning, 6:30, we'll do our external tank load on Sunday morning. The launch window is approximately 10 minutes, as for other station missions. It opens at just after 4:24 p.m. At the T-minus 9 minute point, we'll synchronize with the day of launch parameters and decide whether we choose the opening or the middle of the launch window. Typically, we pick the middle of the launch window, and that will be approximately 4:29 p.m. The mission is scheduled to be an 11-day mission with 1 possible extension day and 2 weather contingency days. There are 3 extravehicular activities planned on flight days 4, 5, and 7, and our landing is planned for approximately 12:02 on September 7th. For scrub turnaround plans, we have a liquid hydrogen hold time of 6 days and a liquid oxygen hold time of 8 days, which gives us a standard 24 and 48-hour scrub turnaround options and allows us to get 4 attempts in 5 days. The overall window extends from the 27th of August through September 7th. The eastern range is open for us all the way through the end of our launch window. The only thing even close is the Delta II GPS launch for the September 14th and 15th, and if that were to become an issue come our landing time, we would negotiate with them on that. So in summary, our teams have been working very hard over the last few years to get a very successful flight for Atlantis and a safe return for the crew. And the vehicle, the launch, and the flight teams and the flight crew are all ready for launch and eager to continue assembly of the space station. We are go for picking up the count this afternoon.
Thank you, Steve. And now we're going to hear from Robbie Ashley, who is our 115 payload manager. Robbie.
Thanks, Bruce. Well, I'm glad to be here today
basically for what it means for us on the station side. It means we're 3 days out in front of launch, and we're getting ready to go launch the vehicle, but also the P3, P4 cargo element. It's been a long time coming. These elements arrived almost 7 years ago, and we've done a lot of work on them over the last 7 years, and we're anxious to see them get on orbit and perform the job that they were intended to do. A lot of people have been working very hard, especially the last 3 years, in keeping these elements ready, and we've done several upgrades in the last 3 years to ensure that they are ready and in good performing condition. We've got the payload all ready to go out at the pad. We finished our last final closeouts early this morning, and as Steve mentioned, they're going to be closing the payload bay doors. So we're done with our work on the vehicle. We do have a mid-deck late stow on Saturday. We've got a couple of experiments that will be flying up in the mid-deck, and we'll be taking those out starting around 3 p.m. Saturday. I guess to conclude, we're anxious to be here. The vehicle is in excellent shape. It's very clean, and we're ready to go get it on orbit and watch it do its job.
Okay, thank you, Robbie. And next we're going to hear from Kathy Winters, our shuttle weather officer. Kathy.
Good morning. Well, our high-pressure ridge that's normally off to our east, the Bermuda High, that is extending right now down across South Florida, and because of that, we're in southwesterly flow. So for the next couple of afternoons, we are going to be expecting to see thunderstorm activity form along our sea breeze and stay here pinned along the coast on the east coast of Florida. So we'll have some weather in the area the next couple of days, but then by launch day, that high pressure area is going to move back up to the north, and that'll put us in easterly flow, and that's a better weather regime for us when it comes to our afternoon weather. We may see some morning coastal showers and even a chance for an isolated thunderstorm in the morning, but by the afternoon, the weather should push inland. There is also a weak low-pressure wave in the area that may enhance some of our offshore showers over the Gulf Stream. If those become thunderstorms and produce those anvil clouds, or the clouds that come off of the top of the thunderstorms, then we may be concerned that some of those may come into our area. But overall, the weather is looking pretty good for launch day. We are also watching, if you look at the satellite picture that we have a tropical wave that's down by the Lesser Antilles. That is starting to look like it has potential to develop today into a tropical storm, or possibly a tropical depression, I should say. The Hurricane Center is watching that closely. They're going to fly an aircraft out into that this afternoon. If that does develop, we're going to be watching that also over the next several days to ensure that we monitor it and see if that's going to be a threat to us. So let's go ahead and get into our forecast. For our tanking forecast, because we're in that weather pattern where we get the morning coastal showers and even a potential chance for a thunderstorm, we do have a 30% chance of weather prohibiting tanking on Saturday morning. As we go through the countdown that day, we may see some weather in the area, but then everything will push inland. So for launch, we just have a 30% chance of KSC weather prohibiting launch due to the fact that we could get some blow off from the top of the thunderstorms coming into our area offshore, and also a chance that the storms inland may be within 20 nautical miles of the Shuttle landing facility. Those are our main concerns, but really 30% chance overall in the summertime in the afternoon is actually a pretty decent number for us. As we go into our CONUS weather, the SRB recovery forecast, sorry about that, we do expect southeast winds, overall pretty good weather out there with just seas 3 to 4 feet. And then for our CONUS sites, over at Edwards, weather looks great. For Northrop, all 3 days we're going to be watching for thunderstorms within 30 nautical miles of White Sands missile range there. And for the TAL sites, all 3 TAL sites do look good for a day of launch. If we do happen to delay 24 hours, the chances of having that low pressure wave in the area that moves off, and so the chances of having those anvils or those upper level clouds coming in off the thunderstorms blowing into our area are less. So because of that, we have a 20% chance of KSC weather prohibiting launch, a little bit better that day. For our CONUS sites, we're still just mainly concerned about Northrop Field, but weather does look good at Edwards. Northrop has the chance for thunderstorms within 30 nautical miles. And again, on the TAL sites, all 3 look good. And if we happen to delay 48 hours, we are just looking at very similar weather as the 24-hour forecast with a 20% chance of KSC weather prohibiting launch. And for the CONUS sites, The Edwards looks good again, and still concerned at Northrop Field for the thunderstorms within 30. And for the TAL sites, all three TAL sites look good. So all 3 days, all 3 TAL sites looking good. So overall, generally pretty good weather when it comes to an afternoon summertime day here in Florida.
Okay, Kathy, thank you very much. Let's take your questions, and I'd remind you to wait for the microphone, give us your name and affiliation. So questions here at KSC? All right. Kevin, wait for the microphone, please.
Kevin Oliver with WFTV. Just curious for Rob, keeping the truss on the ground for this long, what kind of problems would that pose, just having it collecting dust?
Well, first of all, of course, it is in a clean room environment, and it has been since it's gotten here. So, and we do cleaning periodically as we go. So, contamination, we've worked hard to keep the element clean. And as far as other challenges that we faced, being in a 1 gravity, 1G environment for this length of time, we have done some upgrades, as I mentioned, specifically with the solar array wings. There was a concern about those being stored in their blanket boxes for an extended period. We actually, back in 2003, took one of the solar arrays off of this element, sent it out to Sunnyvale in California, and they hooked up a lot of instrumentation to it and did a deployment test just to see what the effects were. At the time, that was the oldest wing in our inventory, so that was a good one to choose. That's why we chose it. So they did some measurements out there and found that it performed much better than even their models had predicted, and gave us a good understanding of just how long these solar panels can be stowed as they are. So we're still well within the timeline that was established. We did replace that wing with another one right away while the flight wing was out in California testing. So we've got a newer wing on the element that's ready for this flight. And in addition, I guess earlier this year, due to the age of the flight batteries, decision was made at the program level to replace those. And I should say, let me back up. It was in early 2005, and we have replaced all of the flight batteries and going through a series of retests. So we've got relatively new batteries on this element, and they've all been tested, checked out. Everything's in good shape, and we got it, like I said earlier, we've got a very clean vehicle that's ready to go.
Thank you, Dan.
Hi, Dan Billow from Channel 2 for Steve. After a lot of downtime, 2 launches, 2 countdowns in 2 months, did you have any doubt at all you'd be able to get here? What was the hardest part?
Actually, this is the way we used to operate years ago, where we would be launching in quick succession, and the team was structured to be able to handle that. We're happy to be back in this mode again.
Thank you. Okay, let's go to the back, Pat. Some questions on the folks against the wall. Raise your hand again, please. All right, Tarek.
Thank you. Tarek Mack with Space.com and Space News for Robbie. I was curious, you mentioned today, of course, the work that's going to go on for the payload bay doors. I'm just curious, what time do you plan to close those doors? I mean, how much work is it for the pad crews, and what are you closing at?
Well, probably a question for Steve, but I can go ahead and answer it. The door closure is actually in work now. They're pulling back the access platforms that were used to gain access to the payload. That's in work now, and the doors should be closed, I believe, by noon today.
Okay, Mark?
Mark Carone from the Houston Chronicle. I believe you said the PRSD load is tomorrow afternoon during the storm potential period. If that got delayed some because of that, how long can you wait to accommodate that if there was a storm threat?
There's a little bit of wiggle time in the schedule. We build some contingency time for exactly that type of thing. So we're looking at it, and we're already thinking about how to go one way or the other on this one. But we should be able to hold if we needed to and pick up right at the other end of the passing storms.
Okay, Mark again.
Mark Carone from Houston Chronicle. After at the end of the last mission, there were some APU issues that were still sort of outstanding, and I think the mission management team is dealing with those. But I just wondered if anything has popped up in regards to the hydraulic system on Atlantis that's needed some last-minute attention or...
Actually, we looked at that. It was discussed at the FRR. The system in Discovery that had that leak we had on orbit, we believe we found the cause, and it's probably a bad Teflon seal on a gaseous nitrogen quick disconnect fitting. That would be unique to Discovery. Atlantis' systems have been pressurized for over a year, and they've been holding tight. We've done a hot fire of the APU system, and it was successful, and everything seems nominal. So we're confident that Atlantis is going to be fine.
Thank you. Mike? Mike Cabbage against the wall.
With the Orlando Sentinel. Last night across the river in Titusville, there was a really violent thunderstorm and hailstorm, and I was just curious what you guys saw at the pad, and I'm assuming you checked it out after the storm passed, and if you noticed anything different out there.
Well, as you know, we have weather protection around the vehicle, the rotating service structures around it, and there are weather protection panels. Typically, if we had any indication that there might have been an issue at the pad, we'd go out and conduct inspections and make sure that nothing went wrong. We didn't have any indications that there was any issue at the pad.
Okay, Bill, raise your hand again, please.
Bill Harwood, CBS for Steve, I guess. Well, you guys at the FR pitched 3 different scrub turnaround options, I guess, based on a variety of things. From what you just said earlier, I assume you're going to do 2, stand down 2, and then single commodity top-offs and do a 1 every other day after that. So between then and September 7th, that's 7. It's 7 launch attempts in all. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, thanks.
All right, let's finish up along the wall. Todd, no question. Okay, Irene, right here, second row.
Thanks. Irene Potts with Reuters for Robbie. Could you talk a little bit about any other cargo that Atlantis is carrying? I know it's pretty full at 35,000 pounds with the trusses, but what else is going to be aboard, and how close Atlantis is to its kind of maximum lift capacity, and also if you've had any late requests from Russia to carry anything.
Okay. Let's see. Yes, the P3, P4 payload, being that it weighs almost 35,000 pounds, it has taken up a lot of the upmass capability. But there is some ISS hardware that will be flying up in the mid-deck. For instance, we're bringing some replacement components for the S-band system, a signal processor that we'll be bringing up, and there's a couple of brackets that we're going to be bringing up that'll be installed on the P6 element that's up there now. And,
okay, all right. Follow up, finally.
Yes, just a couple of the other questions about the just how close Atlantis is going to be to its maximum capacity and any late requests from Russia.
Well, as far as the total capacity, maybe I'll let Steve address that, but I haven't heard of any late requests from the Russians for bringing up any hardware. I'm not aware of anything that's come in late. No, I haven't heard anything about those either, unfortunately.
And at the late capacity of the vehicle?
This particular one, like any station mission, we want to keep as much performance margin as we can. Unfortunately, I don't have the exact numbers that you would be looking for. We'd have to go look those up and get them to you.
No, I think the press kit doesn't have that information. Let's go to Todd in the back, please.
Todd Halverson of Florida Today for Steve. Could you elaborate a little bit on the scrub turnaround strategy and perhaps translate that for us into what days between now and September 7th are potential launch dates?
Well, the answer to that, unfortunately, is depends. Depending on the scenario, whether we need to do any technical fixes to the vehicle, or whether we're waiting on weather, or whatever it causes to not launch that particular day. We have the ability to hold for 6 days on liquid hydrogen, which means that we could go that far before we needed to reload. Depending on how long we were down, if we had to go fix a component, for example, or depending on which day it was that we ended up scrubbing on second or third attempt, it would change everything behind it as far as what the options were. So it would depend on what the scenario was, and we'd have to evaluate that and make a call. But generally, we go in with an option for the very next day, and 2 days after that would be our initial 24 and 48 options. After that, it starts getting fuzzy because everything changes.
Okay, I'm just speaking in relation to the PRSD system, and if you had to stand down to top off, are you approaching that any different than you would during a normal launch campaign as a result of the shorter window?
The window is pretty much the same as we've had for the other station missions. It's a 10-minute, and we generally target the middle. Based on mission requirements, based on which day we scrub, we make the decision to top off. But generally, after the first 24-hour scrub, and we would look at possibly topping up during the next 48-hour down period, depending on what the mission needed from us. And that's as tight as I could give you at the moment.
Okay, let's come back up here to the front row, please, and Pat, over here. Raise your hand, please.
Hi, Mark Kirkman for Interspace News. This is for Robbie. Am I correct in the assumption the reason for the late payload bay door closure was to facilitate battery recharging? And my question is does the battery life come into play in any of the window? When do you have to go and recharge those again?
Well, the first part of your question, the answer is yes. The late payload bay door closure was to accommodate a late charge on the batteries. We've been keeping a small charge on the batteries for a while now, and we continued that out at the launch pad, and we've actually done 3 battery charges since we've been out at the launch pad, the last one being finishing up actually early this morning, around 0200. As far as how long we can go, we have a requirement that says charge the batteries every 14 days. So by doing this late one, that gets us almost to the very end of the window being constrained by, I believe, Russian launch landing traffic out in around the 7th of September. And we do have the station program manager has the ability to make a decision if we are out in that late time frame and we're approaching the end of the 14-day period that you know he can opt to forego that boost charge. The effect on the batteries is minimal, so he has that option. And you know, every indication we've gotten is that you know, we're much more in favor of getting every attempt at getting off the launch pad.
Okay, thank you. We're going to have to cut this short. We've got the crew for this mission coming in shortly, so just a reminder that on NASA TV at 11:15 Eastern Time this morning, the flight crew will be arriving at the shuttle landing facility, followed by their statement at 11:30. Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock again, we'll have another countdown status briefing. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Launch Minus 2-day countdown status briefing for STS-115 and Space Shuttle Atlantis. Here to bring us the status this morning is Pete Nikolenko, the Shuttle Test Director. Good morning. And Kathy Winters, the Shuttle Weather Officer from the Department of the Air Force.
Good morning.
And we'll begin first with Pete Nikolenko. Pete?
Thanks, George. Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be here today to provide countdown status for the launch of the Space Shuttle Atlantis to the International Space Station. Currently, the STS-115 launch countdown is in progress, and we are right now at the T-minus 25 hours and counting mark. Yesterday, we did elect to accelerate the start of the launch countdown by 6 hours in order to accomplish our fuel cell cryogenic load operations this morning before the arrival of impending thunderstorms this afternoon. Also yesterday, we welcomed the arrival of the STS-115 flight crew, and also we worked payload closeouts and closed the payload bay doors for flight last night. Yesterday, as you know, the countdown did begin at noon. Yesterday, we did complete the avionics systems checkouts on board, And last night and early this morning, we worked the preparations for the fuel cell onboard cryogenic load, which did just begin a short while ago. Once we get back into the pad later this afternoon, we'll pick up with the main engine systems checks and pad closeouts. Our other standard countdown activities include the checkout of the onboard and ground communications network tomorrow afternoon at about 1:30 p.m., the retraction of the rotating service structure Saturday at 7 p.m., and then the start of the external tank cryogenic load Sunday morning at about 6:30 a.m. Following the ET load, we'll proceed with the preparations for the flight crew arrival to the pad early Sunday afternoon. Launch window is approximately 10 minutes in length and opens at 4:24 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time on Sunday the 27th. During the T-minus 9-minute hold on Sunday afternoon, we will synchronize to the actual T0 launch time based on the day of launch parameters. And since we typically target the middle of the window, that correlates to that 4:30 p.m. Launch time that's been advertised. This is an 11-day mission with 1 mission extension day and 2 weather contingency days. Currently, the end of mission landing is scheduled here for Kennedy Space Center on Thursday, September 7th at about 12:02 p.m. For the scrub turnaround plans, as Steve mentioned yesterday, we have standard 24 and 48-hour scrub turnaround capability, which basically means we have 4 attempts in 5 days available to us. And if we do not launch on the 27th, our launch window opens approximately 23 minutes earlier each day. In summary, all our systems are in great shape. The countdown is right on schedule, and we're tracking no issues. All of our teams are ready, and they're focused, and we're all looking forward to launch on Sunday and the return to assembly. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. And now to the launch weather forecast and Kathy Winters. Kathy?
Thank you. Well, we do have high pressure that's stretching down to our north, and that's causing us to have southwest flow over Florida, or the central portion of Florida. And so what happens is we get our afternoon sea breeze, we get that low-level convergence, and we get the thunderstorms building up in the afternoons. And so that's what we've had the last few days. We expect to continue to see that for today and tomorrow. And then Sunday is actually going to be our transition day, where that ridge, that high pressure area extending to the south, starts migrating back to the north. Now, yesterday we thought it was going to be solidly up to the north. Today we're starting to get a little bit more concerned that that ridge may still be just kind of moving through the area on Sunday. And so because of that, we did bump our number up from a 30% chance of KSC weather prohibiting launch up to a 40% chance of KSC weather prohibiting launch. The sea breeze will develop again that afternoon. We do expect the storms to start migrating to the west. We'll probably go red through the countdown. But then at some point they'll be moving off to the west, and so our main concern is that they'll still be within 20 nautical miles of the shuttle landing facility at the time of launch. Another new development is that we did have Tropical Depression number 5 develop. We have a satellite picture to show you. It's in the southeastern Caribbean, and that is a concern not for launch, but maybe several days after launch as it's moving towards the northwest, towards the southeast Gulf of Mexico. It does have some shear to overcome over the next couple of days as it moves through the Caribbean. If it does get through that shear, then it gets into a much better environment, and so we'll have to be watching that one closely as it gets into the southeast Gulf of Mexico. I do have a Hurricane Center forecast to show you. You can see it here, and the Hurricane Center is forecasting for the storm to be in the southeast Gulf of Mexico on Wednesday morning on that last forecast point there as a Category 1 hurricane. So right now that does not look like a concern for launch day, though. So let's go ahead and get into our operational forecast for tanking. Now we are expecting a little bit better conditions because of the fact that ridge is migrating a little bit more slowly to the north. So we bumped this number down to 20% chance of violating tanking constraints due to just a slight concern for isolated thunderstorms during that time. For our launch forecast, we're expecting to have the thunderstorms in the area. Again, we'll probably go red during the countdown at some point, but then the storms will migrate to the west, so it'll be all about them getting off to the west far enough to not be a concern for our TLS weather, for return to launch site weather at the shuttle landing facility. So we have a 40% chance of KSV weather prohibiting launch. For our solid rocket booster recovery forecast, weather looks very good there. Seas just 2 to 3 feet and winds only gusting up to 10 knots. And for our U.S. landing sites, only concerned about Northrop Field with thunderstorms within 30 nautical miles, but everything does look good at Edwards. And for our overseas sites, weather looks good at all 3 locations. If we do happen to delay 24 hours, we are expecting that ridge to be more solidly up to the north, and because of that, we expect those thunderstorms and showers that form along the sea breeze to progress inland more quickly and be further away at launch time, and therefore we have a 20% chance of KSC weather prohibiting launch. And for our U.S. Landing sites, still good weather is still good at Edwards, but we're just concerned at Northrop Field again for thunderstorms within 30 nautical miles of the field. And for our overseas sites, everything looks good again. And finally, if we delay 48 hours, similar weather to the 24-hour delay, and that's again a 20% chance of KSC weather prohibiting launch. And very similar weather again at the U.S. landing sites. And for the overseas sites, we're expecting good weather all 3 days. So good weather again for the overseas sites. So mainly we'll be watching for the location of the ridge and if it's going to be migrating up to the north enough for us to get those showers and storms inland. And we'll keep an eye out on Tropical Depression number 5. May form into a tropical storm today, but it looks like it won't be an issue for launch. It just might be an issue for a few days after launch. We'll have to watch it closely. In fact, all the Gulf Coast areas will have to be watching it closely if it does make it into the southeastern Gulf of Mexico. Thank you, George.
Thank you, Kathy. And we're ready now to take questions. Please give your name and affiliation when the microphone comes to you. And we'll start right over here with Mike.
Mike Snyder, Associated Press. I had a question for Pete. Other than bumping up the countdown by 6 hours, has our somewhat violent weather over the past couple of days affected any kind of preparations?
No, it hasn't actually. We did not close the payload bay doors until yesterday evening after the weather passed through. And certainly we had rain protection in place and there was no impact there. Otherwise, the activities have pretty much remained on schedule and all the support teams are in place, so no other impact.
Also, just for Kathy, I know you said with, I guess what's going to be Tropical Storm Ernesto, the depression number 5, won't affect anything for launch, but is there any concern later on, say 11 days after the liftoff?
Well, once you get beyond 5 days, I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty in the forecast once you get beyond 5 days, but we are, if it does survive the next couple of days, we're going to have to watch it when it gets into the Gulf because there is a trough expected to come down into the southeastern portion of the U.S. That would tend to want to pull more towards the north, and then it will depend on the strength of that trough and the timing of the storm if it enters the Gulf, and also the strength of the storm. So there's a lot of variables right now. So what we always do is we just watch them as they develop and progress. We watch the model trends, and we try and get an idea if it's going to be a threat, but we're certainly keeping an eye on it.
All right, Todd.
Todd Halverson of Florida Today with a couple. Kathy, I wonder what your forecast is for weather actually this afternoon out at the launch pad. And Pete, do you think that that'll interrupt the PRSD load at all? And secondly, I wonder, Pete, if you have any information on the resolution of the APU problem from the last flight.
Well, we're expecting afternoon thunderstorms today, and I'll let Pete take the PRSD load question because we have worked some things out with that.
Sure. Currently the PRSD load is in progress. We are cautiously optimistic that we'll complete the load of both commodities before the afternoon thunderstorms do arrive. If they do, however, based on our lightning rules, we would have to temporarily secure and stand down until the weather passed through. So there extends a potential that we could delay the completion of that load, but again, we've got now an adequate buffer to be able to recover if we really had to. And then the second part of your question out on the APU, to my understanding, I think we're going to present the closure rationale to the mission management team this afternoon that says that we have no issue with Atlantis, but I'd like to let them present that case, and we'll hear about that later this afternoon.
Okay, one more time.
Just a quick follow. What time are you expecting to wrap up the PRSD load if everything goes fine and you do not have to stand down?
If currently we expect to complete with the hydrogen commodity a little bit after 2 p.m. and should be opening the pad by about the 3:30 or so time frame this afternoon. So if we get the expected onset of those afternoon thunderstorms, there's a chance that we may not complete by then.
Mark?
Mark Carreau from the Houston Chronicle had a weather question about the tropical system. The concern you're expressing about the storm getting into the southeastern Gulf, is it more for Florida or as far over as the control center in Houston, or are you just talking broadly about, I'm just wondering how you're thinking it, what part of mission operations are going to be affected, the launch site or the control center or any?
Well, we really, it's going to depend on a lot of things. There are several scenarios. It could be a threat to Florida. It could be a threat to any of those locations. Honestly, right now, it's really hard to say exactly what will happen beyond 5 days, because what happens is when these troughs come through, you do have the concern that it could make the recurve back into Florida, maybe more along the lines of the Panhandle. It would have to be a really strong trough for it to turn it as sharply enough for it to be an issue for us. If that trough left it behind, then a high pressure ridge would build into the north, and so then you have the scenario where it could actually start making more of a northwestward progression. So we can't nail it down right now, and I'm not trying to be vague, but there's just a lot of variables. We don't even know if it's going to survive the next few days. The weaker it is, the more likely it would be to make a westward progression as opposed to the northwest progression. So what we're doing is we're just keeping in mind that we have that trough coming in, that it can be a threat to these different locations, and everybody's just monitoring the situation. We'll get a better feel for it when it gets past gets near Jamaica. If it makes it to Jamaica and it's still going strong, we know it's bypassed that shear, and so then we'll start getting a better feel for the situation and what's going to happen when it gets into the Gulf of Mexico. So that'll be about Sunday time period.
Okay, thank you.
Mark?
Thank you, Tarek Alk with Space.com and Space News for Pete. I was just curious, I guess, on the timing of what, what time did you close those payload doors last night? Was it because of the storms that you were delayed in doing that, or did you have some more work to do? And then also, what time did you start the fuel cell loading today?
The payload bay doors were closed last night at about 21:45, as I understand, and it was because we did hold up the closure of the doors and removal of the rain cover protection until after the thunderstorms passed through the area, just to make sure. And all our other closeouts were complete prior to that. For the PRSD load, I do not have the exact start time. As I was leaving to come on over here, they were just picking up with the cryogenic load. Everything else was ready. So I'd say in about the 9:30 time frame we started.
Right, up here in the front.
Hi, Mark Kirkman for Interspace News. These are both for Pete. First off, is this the first time that you've ever decided to pick up a countdown early, as far as you know? And I was just curious what the impacts are there. How hard is it to get the word out, and how many people are we talking about for call to stations to say, hey, we're picking up 6 hours early?
I do not recall if we accelerated a countdown start like this in the past. And there was some degree of coordination in just verifying that all the people who typically support the front part of the countdown would be available. Fortunately, since we were talking about bringing it into the day shift hours, that there really wasn't much of an issue. But there was some degree that we had to just verify through our test management and other supervision that folks would be on station and standing by. And they were. And that's what we do. So it really didn't present as much of a significant challenge as one would think. But we're ready and have been ready, and the countdown's been going really well.
Okay, and also a follow-up on the PRSD. I'm not sure about the mechanics of what's involved for PRSD load. I know you got tankers at the bottom of the pad. I'm just curious, because this is always a problem in Florida, how easy is it to terminate the flow and get it in a safe configuration? I mean, does it take an hour? Is it something you can do almost instantaneously and clear the pad? How long does that take when you...
It's almost situationally dependent, but typically we can secure in fairly short order within a matter of minutes, I believe.
Any further questions? All right, a follow-up, Mike.
Mike Schneider, Associated Press. Last launch, I know we were all very concerned about the bird situation at the launch pad, and I was wondering if you could provide any updates on that, whether the removal or just trying to keep them away has been successful so far.
Well, sure. The round-kill roundup that we've been performing has seemed to be pretty effective. During the last launch, we did have really good detection measures in the order of radar, and during the countdown and the countdown attempts really saw low consistency of birds around the pad. Those same measures will be in place for this mission and subsequent missions.
All right, any further questions? All right, there's one in the back here.
With high definition news. Basically, we're just curious about when you look at concerns in general of a technical nature and then concerns of a weather nature, how do you sum up those two big things? At this point, if there were anything to look out for on the technical side, what would it be, and weather-wise? Could you just sum up those two things?
Well, I'll talk to the technical side. There's no technical issues that I'm aware of. We'll have our standard scheduled mission management team review this afternoon. There are no smoking guns that I'm aware of, so to speak, going into the launch attempt for Sunday. So technically, the vehicle's in great shape, as I reported, and all our systems and supports on posture and ready to support launch on Sunday. Weather, again, there's only certain things within our span of control. So we've got those weather rules that we live to protect the flight hardware and especially the personnel.
Right, and from the weather side, I mean, we've been talking for several days. We talk every morning, and we go over what the weather's going to be for the next week. And because of that, the plans were made to work around the weather with the PRSD loads. And we talked about it for RSS retract, and it looks like the weather will be done for RSS retract. So we talk about that every day and coordinate every day, and then they may coordinate actions based on what the weather is. So.
Any further questions? All right, in that event, our next activity will be the pre-launch press conference this afternoon after the mission management team meeting concludes. It should be in about the 4 o'clock time frame, but stay in touch with the KSC News Center for the actual start time. And that will include our countdown status briefing this morning. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the STS-115 Post-Launch Readiness Review Press Conference. And here to talk about the review and the readiness of Space Shuttle Atlantis is Leroy Kane, the Launch Integration Manager for the Space Shuttle program. Mike Sefrodini, the International Space Station Program Manager from the Johnson Space Center. Mike Leinbach, the Space Shuttle Launch Director from the Kennedy Space Center. Benoit Marcotte, Director of the Canadian Space Agency's Space Station Program. And U.S. Air Force First Lieutenant Caleb Norgren from the 45th Weather Squadron at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. And we'll begin now with Leroy Kane. Leroy?
Thank you, George. Appreciate it. Well, good afternoon. It's really great to be here on the heels of a very successful mission just last month of Discovery. And because I'm here and not John Shannon, you're probably wondering what we're up to. So it was suggested to me that it would be appropriate to give a little bit of background. So let me just give you a couple of notes. Wayne Hale, as you know, is our Space Shuttle Program Manager, and at some point after him taking over in that position, he asked me to take on this position here as Manager of Launch Integration at the Kennedy Space Center. And his intention was to return the position to kind of some of the more traditional roles and responsibilities of a Manager of Launch Integration. Some of you were here, I know, when Colonel Halsell was here in the position. And so in that role, I represent the Space Shuttle program here at Kennedy Space Center for all of the program functions that we are involved with, including chairing the daily Program Requirements Control Board. That's a companion board to the regular PRCB that we have, interfacing with the 45th Space Wing, our partner on the range here, and chairing the major milestone reviews that we have here for Space Shuttle vehicle integration. the orbiter rollout mate review and the ETSRB mate review before we go put the major vehicle elements together in the vehicle assembly building. Some of the things that we do day to day, including preparing for and conducting the flight readiness review on behalf of Wayne Hale in support of the Associate Administrator for Space Ops, Bill Gerstenmaier. So those are some of the things. The reason that I'm here with you today, of course, is because another role of the Manager Launch Integration is to be the chair of the mission management team for the pre-launch and the launch phases of the mission. Then once we launch and get into a safe orbit, then I will hand over the baton, as it were, to John Shannon, who will chair the MMT for the orbit phase, really the flight phase of orbit and deorbit and entry. So that's the plan and the mode that we're in here. For STS-121, John is much more experienced program manager than I am, and I had the ability to shadow him in that capacity, and that was really helpful for me. So with that as background, let me just make a couple notes about how we got to this point today. We knew coming into this summer that we had some real significant challenges as a program. And three of them come to mind, the first of which was, of course, to get Space Shuttle Discovery prepared and ready to fly the mission STS-121. The second major challenge we knew that we would have as a program would be to turn around in a review process, a post-mission process, if you will, from that Discovery mission and get prepared to fly this next mission, STS-115, very soon on the heels of that mission, and execute a review process that we hadn't done in quite some time as a program, quite frankly, and we knew that would be a big challenge for us. The third challenge, of course, is ongoing as we speak, as we prepare Discovery to fly her next mission in December, and with a very short, challenging, and ambitious 110-day OPF processing flow. It's going very well. It's on plan, and we'll talk more about that the next time we talk to y'all before the next mission. But for the first challenge, of course, we accomplished that on the Discovery mission. The second one is the reason that we're here today, and we went through the review process. We discussed in-flight anomalies and resolution of those anomalies as we turned ourselves around and got ready for this mission here. We feel like we're heading into the weekend here in pretty good shape. The reason that we're here today, of course, is because we did execute the launch minus 2-day mission management team review. We had a handful of issues and things that we were still working on, frankly, as we came out of the flight readiness review. And primarily, there were things we just needed a little bit more time to come to a resolution on. We didn't really see anything that was going to be showstoppers for us. Some of the things that you're aware of, including the KU bolt issue, we had still open as we left the FRR. We talked about that today, and as you know, that's been resolved. We talked about CSCS and launch on need and got a status of that. And excuse me, we do have CSCS, contingency shuttle crew capability and launch on need capability. We talked about a couple of in-flight anomalies that we had not had time to completely disposition and resolve when we executed the FRR. So we talked through the APU3 problem, and we got some status on a couple of areas of the program elements as well, including the entry imaging plan that we're going to execute. We got a status on the ferry flight plan. We do have a couple of issues that we're working on the shuttle carrier aircraft, but we think we have those things well in hand and we have a good forward plan. We talked about a couple of new IPRs and things that are basically normal work at this point in our lives as we come up on executing the launch countdown, which we are in now, and Mike will talk to you about that when we get to the launch director. So we feel very good about where we are going into the weekend here. I conducted a readiness poll at the end of the mission management team review today, and we are going to continue here in the launch countdown and we'll get back together tomorrow just to check the status of things before we go into the final phases on Sunday morning. So with that, those are my opening statements now.
All right, thank you, Leroy. And now to Mike Safardini, the International Space Station Program Manager. Mike?
Well, good evening. Last time we were here, just last month, talking about how excited we were about the flight coming up to get ourselves prepared for assembly, and we're, of course, thrilled to be here to talk to you today about getting on with assembly. It was almost 4 years ago that we conducted our last actual assembly flight. We installed what we refer to as the P1 truss onto the space station, and in a couple days we're going to launch to go install the inboard port truss, which is the first of many steps we have to take to complete the assembly of the ISS. As part of our readiness, of course, we do a number of things on orbit to get the station ready. A couple of noteworthy ones were we did check out the attach system. We refer to it as the segment-to-segment attach system. We drove the bolts and the latches to confirm they were all operational, and they were. The crew has configured the station and the tools and the suits all for the EVAs that are coming up during the dock ops. And in addition to that, the 23rd, we did complete a reboost of the ISS, some 2.2 meter per second burn that got us to the 185 nautical miles we need to be for this flight, and in fact phased us for the 13 Soyuz flight and the 23 Progress flight that come up later this fall. So of course, the crew on the ground, the shuttle crew on the ground is more than ready, having trained for 4 years. The station crew is, as I said, has the station configured, and they're ready to get on with these assembly tasks. And the station ops and engineering teams are trained and ready to go, and looking forward to it.
Thank you, Mike. And now to Mike Leinbach, the Space Shuttle Launch Director.
Good evening, everybody. Well, as you know, we picked up the countdown yesterday around noontime, which represented about a 6-hour earlier countdown start than we had originally planned. And we did that to try to beat the afternoon weather that we're experiencing right now, as a matter of fact. What we'd hoped to do was to get into our PRSD, our fuel cell reactant loads, this morning, both commodities, get them on board the ship before the afternoon storms hit. We were able to get the liquid oxygen on board before the storms kicked in, and so we're in a stand-down mode right now out at the launch pad. The pad is cleared, LOX is on board for the fuel cells, and we'll get into the hydrogen load this evening as soon as the lightning threats pass. We should be about 9 o'clock tonight. 8, 9 o'clock tonight is what we're hearing from the Weather Service. And so we're in a little bit of a stand down now, but due to the fact that we got started early yesterday, we're actually will come out of the load tonight essentially right on time, where we would have been had we started the count yesterday evening and wouldn't have had to stand down for any kind of weather. So a little bit down right now. We'll be able to catch that back up, no problem. The countdown's going pretty well. We have had a couple of minor IPRs. We did have a lightning strike to the pad today, and we're performing all of our vehicle tests per our procedures to deal with that lightning strike. We have lots of detection systems at the launch pad, both on the ground side and on the vehicle side, to deal with any type of lightning that we may get and be able to prove that the vehicle is good to go. And the team is in the process of doing that right now. Right now, we see no problems at all with the vehicle. And so again, once the pad opens up tonight from the lightning advisories, we'll get into the hydrogen load, and we'll be back on the timeline, hoping to give Mike's station component a good ride Sunday afternoon.
Thanks, Mike. And now to Benoit Marcotte, the Director of the Canadian Space Agency Space Station Program. Benoit?
Good evening, everybody. First of all, thank you very much to NASA for allowing CSA to be part of this briefing, because STS-115 is a very special mission for the Canadian Space Agency and for Canadians in general, because it's the first opportunity that we have to fly a Canadian astronauts in 5 years. Our last flight was with Chris Hadfield when he went up to install the Canadarm2 on the International Space Station. It's also the first time we're going to have a Canadian astronaut operating Canadian robotics on orbit to do a very significant assembly task. So, we're excited about that, and we're also excited to see that we will be continuing to use some Canadian technology, Canadian talent on the the shuttle and on the ISS in order to ensure the safety of the shuttle and also complete the mission successfully. You know that Steve McLean is a veteran astronaut, flew on STS-115 back in 1992. He's very proud and very happy and pumped up, ready to go for this mission as MS-4, where his task, again, will be focused on robotics, but also conducting one EVA, and again, a second Canadian to have a chance to go out on a spacewalk. He will be deeply involved with, doing the inspection of the shuttle on flight day 2 and at the end of the mission as well, with Chris Ferguson and Dan Burbank operating the OBSS, operating the laser camera system, again, a Canadian technology. He's going to be the primary operator of Canadarm2 to move P3, P4, and that's what Canadarm2 is there to do, to assemble the station, and to do that with Jeff Williams will be some very highlight of that mission for us in Canada. And the EVA, we're looking forward to watching him, work on the Sarge and making sure the Sarge is ready for operation. Canada continues to participate in these missions. We've done so since Canadarm2 has been on orbit. We've been training the crews to operate. Everybody that operates the arm on orbit has been trained first and foremost in Montreal. We've got Canadian astronauts that are serving in Houston on Capcom duties or so. Chris Hadfield has done some robotics work as the CB Robo and now moving on to other tasks. We've got Canadian flight controllers who are working both at JSC and in Canada, in the Operations Center in both locations. And in fact, on this mission, we've got 50% of the shifts will be manned by Canadian flight controllers. And Canada continues to support the logistics, sustaining engineering end of this, of all of our robotic systems that we control out of Montreal and obviously with our contractor in Brampton. So in short, we're proud. We're ready to go. As you've seen in previous briefings, Canadarm2 is ready on orbit. The mobile base system is positioned, ready to wait for the shuttle arrival. We're looking forward to seeing this truss continue to elongate, and we're getting ready ourselves to bring the two-arm robot that we call Dexter, that will be transiting along that truss in a couple of years down the road in order to, do another step of robotics, which is maintenance of the ISS. So we're very proud to see, Steve, again, going to orbit, continue to motivate Canadian youth and also youth around the world in continuing to assemble the station, build it to operate it both as a test bed for future exploration, but also for our science community. So Canada is pleased, and we're pleased to be here, and we're looking forward to a successful mission.
Thank you. And now to First Lieutenant Caleb Norgren from the 45th Weather Squadron at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. Okay.
Thank you, George. Good evening, everybody. Hopefully everybody made it here dry and not too wet. As everybody knows, we had numerous thunderstorms today. It's kind of we've had that last couple of days. What's going on is the high pressure ridge is to our south, and what that does, that kind of gives us a southwesterly flow, and that kind of pins the sea breeze right against us, and we have all these thunderstorms. Plus, it allows the west coast sea breeze to push across the state, and we get kind of another wave of thunderstorms with that. We are expecting that again tomorrow, so look for thunderstorms again tomorrow afternoon. On Sunday, we are watching that ridge. It is migrating to the north, and hopefully it makes it to the north of us so we get more of an easterly flow, which will push the thunderstorms inland. So we're watching that closely. Right now, the models kind of have it right over the top of us, so it's kind of southeasterly, southwesterly, maybe southerly, so we're watching that real closely, but we're hoping to get a good southeasterly push to push all those thunderstorms inland. So as of right now, we're going with a 40% probability of KSC weather prohibiting launch. If there is a 24-hour delay, looking for Monday, definitely by Monday we'll have a good southeasterly flow, which will push those thunderstorms inland, and so that number drops down to a 20% probability of KSC weather prohibiting launch, and again, that would be the same for 48 hours out. Also, weather-wise, everybody knows there's a tropical depression out there. Now it has been upgraded to a tropical storm. It's Tropical Storm Ernesto, and if I get the graphic, we can look at the chart. You can see here, right now it's out there in the Caribbean. It's moving to the northwest, and the latest point out there is Wednesday morning. It would be just north of the Yucatan Peninsula. So not looking for that to be a threat as far as on launch day. That is something we're monitoring closely. Right now, for the next 48 hours, it's going to enter an area of a lot of shear. So we're going to watch that. If it makes it out through the next 48 hours past that shear, then it's probably going to enter more of a favorable area for development. So then you can see a little more development. So we're going to watch that closely right now as far as track and intensity. We'll know a lot more after the next 48 hours. But like I said, as of now, by Wednesday morning, it's looking to be in the middle of the Gulf, just north of the Yucatan Peninsula. Just to sum things up, for launch day, we're going with a 40% probability of KC weather prohibiting launch. If we go into 24 hours, we'll drop that number down to a 20% probability. And that's all I have.
All right, thanks, Caleb. We're ready now to take questions. So please give your name and affiliation when the microphone comes to you. We'll start here in the front with Mike Schneider.
Hi, Mike Schneider, Associated Press. I had a question for Mike. I was wondering if you could give us more details about the lightning strike. Where exactly on the launch pad did it strike? And also if you could give us some details on what the lightning protection systems are out there.
Yeah, the preliminary indications are that it struck the catenary wire system, which is what it's there for. It is our lightning protection system. It's a 3/4-inch wire rope. You'll see the large white tower on top of the launch tower itself, on top of the fixed service structure. That white tower is the lightning arresting system, and at the very top of that is where the wire connects. And so the preliminary indication is that the lightning struck that wire. On that wire, down at the termination zones to that wire, we have instrumentation that records the amperages locally. We have not yet been able to go out there and to read those indications yet. The pad's still cleared. But we also have a system that monitors vehicle data coming back from the pad, both power data and instrumentation data, and that all looked perfectly fine. We also take our television cameras that we have at the launch pad and triangulate them. Whenever we get into a lightning advisory with a vehicle at the pad, we set up specific cameras to triangulate in case we do get a lightning strike so that we can verify exactly where it hit. That data is being pulled together. It looks like it probably hit the catenary wire. So we'll go through our standard process, and we do a very, very extensive look at the data that we get back from the vehicle. And it could cause us to retest some of the systems on board the ship if we decide to do that. If it doesn't look like it violated any of our criteria, then we'll just press on. Not unexpected that we would get a lightning strike at the pad this time of year. We had one out at Pad A yesterday. We had one at Pad B today, unfortunately. But right now, we don't see it as an issue for the vehicle.
All right, next to Mike J.
Jay Barbary with NBC for Mike Surfadini. Mike, I understand you had to crunch some numbers on the Seadra this week. You have any problems with the carbon dioxide? Is everything okay?
Let's see. On board, we do have a number of carbon dioxide removal systems. One is Seadra. It's on the USOS side. And from the standpoint of scrubbing for 3 crew, which is its role in a backup role to the Vosduke carbon dioxide removal system, it's operating fine. The number crunching that we did was in support of the CSCS calculations that we talked about in the event that the entire crew ends up staying on ISS for an extended period of time. We assume that the Seadra can scrub CO2 for 5 crew persons, and that's what our initial calculations assumed. We have noted some degraded performance due to an anomaly we've been dealing with for some time. We believe due to an anomaly we've been dealing with for some time, where the beds are leaking out some of these granules, zeolite granules, into the system. And the system's been modified to have screens to protect it, but over time these screens can become clogged with the zeolite. So we believe what we have is some restrictions that are preventing the Seadra from operating at its highest performance level. And so the number crunching we did was to go figure out what level we thought it was operating at, and we had to do that by doing a test where we shut off Vosduke and then look to see how it performed for 3 crew, and then through the use of our models predict the level at which it could scrub, and then confirm that we had enough LIO on board or other means to do CO2 removal or mitigations to ensure that we protected the crew on orbit. So that was the number crunching you heard.
Are you saying then that you might have to just keep 5 on board and the others on board the shuttle? Or
no, not at all. In fact, this is why it gets a little bit confusing if I don't say it just right. There are 3 systems on board to scrub CO2. The Vosduke, which we assess and assume can scrub 3 crew. The Seadra, which we assume conservatively, usually, can scrub 5 crew. And then the remainder of that, the remainder of the scrubbing is done with LIO cartridges. And these are just cans that we plug in. You blow the CO2 air over, and it attracts the CO2 molecules and reduces CO2 that way. So we balance all of those when we have all the crew on board. We do this. This is just the way we operate. When all the crew are on board, when we have a shuttle docked and we have seven additional crews, sometimes as many as 10 crew on board station. So when we do our calculations for the extended period of time, we assume that the Seadra is doing its fair share, which is 5 crew. And we've noticed that it can't quite do that. So what we've done is said, okay, it's not quite doing the part we thought it was supposed to. So we ensured that we have enough LIO on board, or are able to get enough LIO on board to be able to cover for the crew. And so what we ended up doing is talking about how we could deal with either an elevated ppCO2 level for that period of time. We also talked a lot about how we would repackage what is intended to fly on 23 progress, which happens after this flight, so we'll have time to change the manifest, which is one of the assumptions we make as a conservative assumption. And then we looked at also alternatives, like perhaps bringing some of the crew home on Soyuz. And this particular flight, we're well covered for CSCS. But because we did those calculations and we assumed Seadra would scrub up to the 5 level, we had to go back once we knew what it could do and make sure that our calculations still showed we could support CSCS.
Okay, thank you, sir. I got it. Are you going to move P6 over on 10A?
Yes,
Is that
sir.
still the plan?
That is the plan, yes, sir.
All right, let's come over here to Craig.
Thanks. Craig Cavalli, Aviation Week for Leroy and Mike Sefferdini. I know Mission Control Center Moscow and Houston practice fairly routinely backup control center, software exchange, and so forth. But if you were to get a pretty severe hurricane coming into Houston mid-flight, could MCC Moscow handle the load, and are you going to dispatch any extra beyond what you normally do, flight control or flight director types to Moscow just in case?
Well, let's see, Mike, I'll answer first from a shuttle program standpoint. We do have well-practiced and exercised procedures in the event that we have a hurricane issue in the Gulf, for example, and we have to go to some kind of emergency mission control center capability. As to whether or not we are actually deploying extra folks to Russia, I don't know the answer to that question. We have not necessarily done that in the past, but every situation is different relative to which storms you're looking at, and how far away they are, and what you really might be looking at in terms of probability of being impacted on a given mission. So from a space shuttle program standpoint, we certainly do have backup mission control center capabilities. Mike?
Let's see, so it's the shuttle guys that end up using the control center ads that we put in Moscow. And we, as you know, have a small team already in Russia. So as a matter of course, whenever we have hurricanes in the Gulf and approaching, we do try to decide, look at the workload we have and decide what we have to do. Normally, we can stand the crew down enough that we send the team off to somewhere north of Houston, usually to some hotel out of harm's way. They have laptops that can get data for them, and they communicate to the folks at Moscow, where they can make commands to the station as necessary. And so, in addition to that, I should say, we also check out the backup control center system about once a month, and in fact, just recently did that. So that would be our plan. Of course, during a docked ops where you're installing a major element, that would be a significant challenge. So we would certainly work through that, and I would guess that if we thought we were going to be knee-deep in the installation part of it, we probably would end up sending some more of our folks to Moscow. But all of our folks have multi-entry visas, and we can make that decision pretty late, depending on if we feel like the storm's going to be there. Now we do have some flexibility in this system, and once we get the truss installed and the cable trays installed that get the heaters on, although it'd be a heck of a lot of work, we can do a lot of this in the stage. So there is some points where we could, if we felt like we had to, we we could stand down and let the storm pass and do some of the work in the stage. That would be a major impact to the program in terms of all the other work we're trying to get done, but it's certainly doable.
Greg, a follow-up? Hang on, let's get the mic.
Just a quick follow-up, Mike. So depending on obviously what the storm does, but it's kind of a real-time call whether or not you'd undertake the full plate of 115 if you'd have to evac Houston and go to MCC Moscow for the control.
I would say that's true, and in fact, the storms have to get pretty close before your predictions really are telling you with any granularity that something that you need to react to. And so there are a lot of storms that pop up, and we're always operating. So this is pretty much a normal exercise for us, just to watch the storm and see where it's going to go. It also depends on the size of the storm, whether we even would evacuate. There are a lot of factors that play into that. We would do a lot of planning along the way, but we wouldn't react until the storm was much closer and was predicted to hit. So we've got a lot of time to watch this one before we have to even react.
All right, let's come back here along the wall. Stephen.
Stephen Young with spaceflightnow.com. For Leroy, I'm wondering whether the storm played any factor in your discussions today, and whether you could just give us a bit of a refresher on what would happen as far as shuttle ops. Is the plan to still move MCC to here, and would that mean you'd probably end up having to bring the shuttle home early?
Okay, Stephen, the answer to your first question on storm factors is yes, we did talk about the storms that we have currently, and what our thinking is relative to not only Houston, by the way, but also the Michoud assembly facility where we put the external tanks assembly to put the tanks together, the Stennis Space Center, as well as here at the Kennedy Space Center. So we are, as a program, very keenly aware anytime there are storms in the Gulf or storms over in the Atlantic coming our way, and we pay very close attention to them. So we talked a little bit today about if there's anything that we needed to do at this date and time from a proactive standpoint. And then we also talked a little bit about just dusting off any procedures and capabilities that we already have in place. And we reminded ourselves of the training that we've gone through in the past relative to those emergency procedures. And as to your second question, I think I answered it relative to refreshing our memories on what our capabilities are. The emergency control center capability is, in fact, to come here to Kennedy Space Center for the space shuttle. And frankly, if we get to the point of having to execute that, it is for the expressed intent of, for shuttle alone kind of operations, if you will, and for undocking and doing deorbit and entry. So it would be an end to the space shuttle portion of the mission if we execute the emergency MCC procedures all the way to the point of deploying a team here to the Kennedy Space Center. And again, it would be for the express intent of bringing the shuttle home at that point. So we have exercised those procedures, and that's what we would do.
Just to follow up on that, should it look like the storm is still on its current course, do you foresee any circumstances where you might stand down, or is this one of those things where you're just never going to get anything done if you're always worrying about something that's that far out?
Yeah, you know, it's a good question. And living on the Gulf Coast for a lot of years, when I was in Houston and then being here now, we pay a lot of attention to hurricanes and these storms, so I have some experience. And my observation has been that the storms that we're looking at and talking about now are just too far away. It's far too much uncertainty in terms of what they will or will not do, and quite frankly, I don't see any scenario between here and the launch period that it is we're trying to launch into, at least for the first several days, where we would have any concerns that would cause us to stand down. I suppose there might be a scenario way out there at the end of our launch period, but I don't envision that at this point for where we are.
Hey, Tracy?
Tracy Watson, USA Today for Mike Sefferdini and Mr. Marcotte. You may have heard that Anusha Ansari was announced today as the third Soyuz crew member, and I'm wondering whether you have any concerns about that, because she has been training as the backup and not the prime, and whether there would be any restrictions on her movement when she gets to the ISS.
Yes, we are aware, and as you said, she has been training as the backup. We consider her, from our perspective, they are tourists, and from that perspective, then all of the jobs required of the tourist, if you will, on board, we feel like she's perfectly trained, and in fact have concurred with that that selection for her to fly. So we're absolutely okay with that.
Okay, Mark Rowe next.
Mark Rowe from Houston Chronicle. I had two quick questions. What time did the lightning hit today, and what is the CSCS estimate at this point?
Let's see, the lightning struck at about 2 o'clock, as I recall. I can get the exact time for you, Mark. It was in the middle of our meeting, and I left the meeting to go out and call the control room to see what was going on. It was about 2 o'clock or so.
Okay, Tarek?
Well, Mark had another question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
It was the CSCS estimate for the mission at this point.
What can the station handle, or when will the shuttle be ready to go fly?
I'd like to know both.
Both?
You offer.
I can do 83.
Yeah, when we reviewed this again today, our launch on need capability is 76 days for the preparation of Discovery as a rescue vehicle, and we've got 83 days on Mike's station, so we've got overlap there. And the other thing we talked about, Mark, is the launch on need external tank, ET-123 in our vernacular, is down on its schedule by just a couple of days from its plane delivery date here of 9/10. So with the overlap, and we still have margin for the CSCS capability.
Okay, Todd. Next one down.
Todd Halverson of Florida Today with two for Mike Leinbach. First of all, on RSS rollback tomorrow night, I'm wondering if weather becomes a problem for you tomorrow, how long you can delay that move before you have to delay on Sunday. And similarly, for the tanking operation on Sunday morning, if you had morning showers, which I think are a possibility, that would prohibit an on-time tanking, how long can you delay that operation before you have to scrub?
Okay, I'm glad to answer those. The rotating service structure retraction is set for 7:30 tomorrow night, and we probably have a good 4 or 5 hours buffer in that time frame. Much later than that, then it does start impacting our preparations to load the external tank. But it's a good 4 or 5 hours or so. And then for tanking itself, Sunday morning, we have tanked almost 2 hours late before and still made the opening of the window. So for talking purposes, about 2 hours from the planned start of tanking.
All right, Tarek, next one down in the line there.
Thank you. Tarek Malik with Space.com and Space News, actually for Benoit. But a question, this is NASA's first station assembly sequence, since late 2002. You also have your own hardware waiting to go up, and I'm kind of curious, from your standpoint, how does it feel to kind of be at this point finally after NASA's recovery, and how has that wait been for the CSA?
It's great to be at this point at this time, and I think NASA has done, and NASA and RSA have done an excellent job maintaining the space station manned during the time that we were recovering from Columbia. The MSS was continued to do its work on orbit. We continued to develop the MSS during that time frame as well. As you know, we've developed a ground control capability during that time frame, which is now being put to good use as we restart assembly. And this is a capability that will help us, minimize the burden on crew on orbit to do robotics. So, you know, the MSS has done, you know, is doing great work and will continue to do great work. So we're pleased to be where we are right now, and we're pleased to see the sequence starting again. 2 great flights last summer and this summer already. So we're ready to go, and the robotics team is very much ready to do this assembly work.
Okay, Bill.
Bill Harwood, CBS, and Leroy, I apologize because I wasn't going to ask a weather question, but I've gotten confused, so I'm going to ask one, and then I have one for Mike Suffredini. Forget this storm, but I mean, anytime you had to invoke one of these deals where you've got to leave MCC and you've got a flight up there, you know, we've been told this flight, for example, is the most complex bit of commanding on the ground. Y'all told us that at all these briefings. Can you do this mission or a mission like this if you're not in MCC? And what I got confused about, Leroy, is if you evacuate MCC and the shuttle guys come here and station guys are talking to Moscow, but if you evacuate, does that mean the mission's over? I'm trying to understand what happens if MCC gets evacuated for shuttle and for station, if I can.
Okay. Okay. I believe it. Let me see if I can provide some clarity on that. If we had to evacuate, if we get to the point of having to evacuate the Mission Control Center in Houston for purpose of being able to control the space shuttle, we would not be able to execute the docked mission. We do not have a capability to do a docked mission execution, certainly not of the complexity of the one that we're about to embark on. We've never had the intent of being able to cover that capability with this Emergency Mission Control Center capability. So we would undock from space station and deorbit the orbiter at the first safest opportunity that we had and perform entry and landing. And we would leave station in the safest configuration that we could, frankly, and come back and pick up the pieces, if you will, on a subsequent mission and try to execute for both programs. But I hope that answers your question, Bill.
Well, let me touch on that just a bit. There is a point at which we're going to leave the truss on orbit, and before that point, the truss can be put back in payload bay and brought home. I hope we don't do that. That would be really not much fun. But once we get the truss attached and umbilicals hooked up, which happens very early in the dock time frame, as I said before, we are in a safe configuration. That is, the heaters are working, and so the hardware will be safe. And then the shuttle can also leave if it needs to do that. All that commanding we talked about, we absolutely cannot do through our backup control center in Moscow. And in addition to that, all that work that has to occur now has to be done by an increment crew who's not really trained for that. Most of the training for the work to get the Sarge set up so that we can rotate it so we can deploy the rays has all been done by the crews training, the shuttle crews training. That's not to say we can't do it, but it'll take us a while to get everything set up, get the team back in place, get the commanding ready, get the crew trained, explain all we have to do. So what you're looking at is a pretty long delay while we do all that work. Once the ground team gets back, we get the crew all set up what they need to do. So there is a point at which, probably a very, very small window at which we'll be installing truss where we'll have to make that decision. But we will be able to predict before we get to that point which way we got to go, and whichever way it is what we'll do to make sure we're safe.
Thanks for that answered the question. I'm sorry, just one more for you, Mike. Since this is a pre-launch news conference, it's almost everybody's looking at, we're all talking about lightning and weather and storms and stuff, but this is a pretty significant mission for you guys, so here's the easiest question you can ever get today. What's the significance of this mission and the importance of getting this assembly flight up to start the process over again?
Yeah, you know, unfortunately, there's a lot of euphemisms used, and you can go to sports analogy, you know, one game at a time. We'll take it one game at a time, but this flight has to work for the next flight to occur, and the next flight to occur, and the next flight to occur. I mean, it's the next few have to kind of happen in the right order. If we don't get P34 installed, then I can't go reconfigure the power and cooling system, which I'm doing on the next flight, which means I can't go bring up the next major power element, which comes on the next flight, and so on and so forth. So this flight is critical to our ability do this truss reconfiguration, this growth of the power system and the central cooling system, which has been dormant on orbit for about 3 years or so. This is all critical. If we don't do this flight, then the next ones don't get to happen until we get this work done. So in the big scheme of things, even though we say we take them one step at a time, this one's is a key. We have to make this one, we have to let this one occur before the next ones can go. So this is clearly in the critical path for success in assembly.
Hey, Peter.
Peter King with CBS News Radio, and this is playing off something, Mike, you just said about bringing the truss back home if you had to do that. I think the question is probably for Leroy, but I'm just wondering the implications of coming back with an unexpected 35,000-pound piece of hardware. How much more difficult is it to bring the shuttle back with that kind of extra weight aboard? Has anything like that, has it landed with anything that heavy before?
Let's see, that's a good question. I don't know that we've ever landed with that much cargo in the payload bay before from a mass standpoint. We brought things back like LDEF, as you recall, which is a sort of a school bus-sized experiment that we had deployed for a long time, and finally brought it back on STS-32. So there's some other big pieces of cargo that we've brought back. I don't know the exact number in terms of the landing weight. We would do everything within our power to find a way to leave that payload on orbit.
Thank you.
And furthermore, on the space station would be our first priority.
All right, Irene.
Irene Klotz with Reuters. Just a real quick follow-on what you just said, Leroy. What would be kind of the flight day or the sequence in the flight when you would reach that minimum amount of work done to leave the truss on orbit? Would it be prior to the first EVA, or would you need to get at least that first EVA under your belt? And then either for you or for Mike Lineback, if you could just talk a little bit about what your strategy would be as far as launch attempts if the system that's here now stalls and the weather forecast for launch day continues to worsen. Would you pass up that day, and would you make that decision before tanking and go for your 2 launch attempts when the weather's better, or would you go for 3 in a row? Or just kind of, if you can talk a little bit about that. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, I'll. The first one I'm going to volley to Mike because it's really a function of things that are happening for the integrated mission while we're on station. It's a day or two after we dock, but he can give you the details of that. The second one, I'll give you my piece of it, and I think Mike Leinbach will be able to comment on it as well. But for any scrub turnaround scenario, the weather is a huge factor and is part of one of the many things that we will consider. And so in this case, we will also consider, if we have a scrub turnaround discussion on Sunday night, for example, as to whether or not we're going to come back Monday. I can't foresee a case where we wouldn't, but it's possible depending on the reason for the scrub. So we will factor in the weather for any scrub turnaround discussion that we have, and I'll let Mike Mike Leinbach comment on that question as well.
Okay. Yeah, our typical baseline plan for launch attempts is 4 attempts in 5 days, as you know, and they start Sunday. So we would try Sunday, Monday, stand down Tuesday, and then try Wednesday, Thursday. That's always our going-in plan. That's the plan we expect to exercise this time. But again, it's fully dependent on what causes the scrubs. If it's simply a weather scrub, and it looks like we have a decent shot at an attempt the following day, we will take a 24-hour stand down and try the next day. If we've had a failure on board the orbiter and it takes us 2 days to change out that component, for instance, then that drives the scrub turnaround planning process. We also have the capability of trying 3 launch attempts in a row. If we scrub on Sunday and Monday, and for whatever reason it looks like we really want to try on Tuesday, we have the ability, the team and the vehicle and the ground systems have the ability to try 3 attempts in a row. We've done that once before. We practice it on paper. We have the commodities to do that, And so we could, as a program, choose to go 3 in a row if it makes sense to do that. So again, Leroy's exactly right. It's fully dependent on what causes the scrubs. Give us 4 attempts in 5 days, and we feel pretty good about it.
Let's come down a little bit more.
We didn't finish your answer. The answer to your question was, once we get the element installed and the first EVA complete, assuming we do everything we plan to do, which is get the 2 umbilical trays hooked up to get the heater power going on P3, P4. Then if the shuttle had to leave, the element would be in a safe configuration. We refer to that as a minimum duration flight, and I believe that's after the first day we're going to pull the element out right after we dock, which I don't think we've done in recent history. We'll put it out in a hover location, and the next morning early we'll install it, and then the crew goes out and does their EVA. And then once that's complete, assuming they get all the tasks done that we had planned for that EVA, then if we are in a condition where they have to leave, the element will survive.
All right, let's come down further down the second row to Vic, right here in yellow.
Rick Dobbs from HDNet Television. And back to the worst case weather scenario in Houston that causes evacuation and causes premature separation from the station. Why instead would you not? What I really want to ask is, aren't you sorry you brought it up? But why wouldn't you keep them up there? You have the capacity, you have the supplies, you have the water and the oxygen and all the rest. Why wouldn't you keep them up there to wait until you could reoccupy mission control and complete the mission as planned, instead of bringing them back, unless I misunderstand something?
Well, see, there's 2 parts to it. There's a shuttle and a station piece. The fundamental reason why, from a space shuttle standpoint, we would not do that is because we cannot loiter on orbit and then still execute the mission and then still bring the space shuttle back home. The reason we can't continue on, or the crew can't necessarily continue on the mission from a shuttle program side of it anyway, is there's too much interaction required with the ground to be able to execute this assembly mission, and that's where I'll hand it to Mike.
Well, to me, it's just timing. You decide that you're going to evacuate. It takes. Was anybody in Houston when we had the last storm last summer and we all tried to get out of town? I mean, you just can't do that quickly. It takes you a number of days to decide first that you're going to do it. Then you evacuate. You got to deconfigure the whole control center. Then everybody has to relocate, and the families and all that has to happen, and then it has to pass. Then you got to get everybody else and get everything up. By the time you do all that, you've used up all your dock time on orbit. And so exactly what Leroy said, you just run out of loiter time. And on this flight, every day is used. We've got a +1 day, which will probably be taken up pretty quickly, and if we're lucky, the cryo will give us 1 extra day. But we have every day in this mission absolutely full. So there's not a lot of time to do nothing for a little while and then come back and get finished. So.
If you have 83 days of survival time in the station as a safe haven in the event of a rescue mission by Discovery, then why can't some of that time be used to loiter? Why can't you loiter?
Because of the shuttle itself. The shuttle's got a very short, remember, the shuttle's got to fly it and come home, and it's got a limited amount of cryo. 83 days, the shuttle's done early on, and that's the answer, right?
Next over, Vic Ratner.
Vic Ratner from ABC. For Mr. Kane, you're pushing the weight limits. This is the heaviest payload ever. How close to the limit are you for this payload, and what adjustments have you had to make because of the weight of the payload in the performance?
That's a good question. We, from an ascent performance standpoint, we actually have a good ascent performance margin on this mission. We don't have as much as we would like to have, and as much as we have enjoyed on some other missions, and we don't have enough to do a lot more. From the standpoint of how much are we pushing, I don't think we're pushing with respect to the launch performance or for landing, if you will. We would not put ourselves in a situation where we didn't have margin to the edges of the envelope, and we're not there on this mission yet. But it is a heavy payload.
Okay, we're going to take about 2 more, and then we're going to wrap it up. Right behind you there to Kelly.
Kelly Young, New Scientist for Mike Saffredini. What's your limiting consumable for CSCS, and are there any plans to clean out or check out the Seadra further?
You would think those were easy questions. When we came to FRR, the limiting consumables were 2, actually. It turned out it was oxygen and food came in at about 83 days. PPCO2 came in at like 119 days. So now we had this discussion we had on Seadra, and so it just depends on how you manage the PPCO2. So our plan is to manage the PPCO2 to 83 days. So it's hard for me to answer that. It's like a horse race for the 3 major consumables, or the 3 major items you need: food, oxygen, and PPCO2. Water was not quite as constraining. Hope that helps. And what was your other question? Oh, clean out the Seadra. You know, a lot of folks have asked us that question. There are a number of things we can do to the Seadra that we're fairly certain will gain its performance back on orbit. But first and foremost is go conduct this mission as we planned. Seadra is CSCS is a far out contingency case. So because the nature of the beast is we try to be a little bit conservative, as long as the Seadra is performing its duty for the docked operations as planned for the mission we plan to go do, we just assume not go take it apart to work on it until we're done with this docked op. So there are a number of things we're going to go look at, but we'll unless we have to, we won't look at them until after the shuttle crew leaves.
Okay, here on the second row, did you have a question here? All right, then let's come up right here on the end, and that'll be the last question.
Hi, Mark Kirkman, Interspace News. A couple questions for the other Mike. Am I correct that you didn't actually start the H2 loading at all in the PRSD? And can you just give us a rundown, either you or Leroy, of what the other IPRs were that you discussed today?
Yeah, as far as the other reactant, the hydrogen for the fuel cells, we never got into that at all before the storms hit us. We had a little bit of margin at the end of the LOX load before hydrogen, but we knew the storms were coming, and so we elected not even to get into it, because our rules say if we were loading hydrogen and we had a lightning threat, we'd have to terminate that. So we just chose to stand down, do the safe thing. So no, we never got into it at all. And the other part? There was a data transmission issue that's been resolved. These are all very, very minor. There's an inadvertent switch throw, which occurs every now and then. No harm, no foul is the way we disposition those. So there's nothing else on board the vehicle or the ground system standing in our way.
All right, with that, that will conclude our briefing. Our next event is a countdown status briefing tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. Thank you very much.
The weekend forecast in your part of the world, Kevin Carvo is at the Weather Center. Kevin.
The most current forecast that has come out for the hurricane that we're expecting to happen over the next couple days. This is Tropical Storm Ernesto right now. Last year at this time, we had seen 11 storms at this particular part of the summer. Now we're only looking at 5, so the hurricane season really hasn't kicked in like it did last year. But let me show you what's happening right now. If you take a look at the satellite image, this is a storm we're talking about. This is Ernesto. Over the last 24 hours, you can really see that this storm has built up. The clouds have really started to actually increase in diameter around the storm. So this is continuing to move towards the west-northwest. I'm going to give you the most current coordinates that just came out. We are looking at a storm right now of about 74 kilometers per hour, gusting up to 93. Now you see, this storm is expected to stay tropical storm strength from the next day to the next 24 hours, and then as it makes its way towards Jamaica and over Jamaica, it does increase in intensity. So 2 days from now, we're expecting a hurricane. 3 days from now, we're expecting a hurricane towards parts of Cuba, and we'll be watching that very carefully. Now, I don't normally do this, but I took the forecast out to 5 days so that you could see this. 5 days is a little bit inaccurate to go with a hurricane tracker, but I do want to show you that even after this many days, this storm is still going to be a system we're going to be watching. Watch this all the way up into the Gulf of Mexico, and once it's in the Gulf of Mexico, of course, it doesn't have any place else to go. There is going to be some landmass that will be affected by this particular storm, and they do keep it as a hurricane intensity all the way to the next 5 days. So Labor Day weekend, I think, is going to be a very significant weekend storm-wise. When we talk about the precip with this storm, most of the rain is actually going to fall towards the north. As you see, the system is moving. Parts of the Dominican Republic, also Haiti, are going to be affected. Then as it makes its way towards Jamaica, you can see right here, a lot of rain is going to be falling there. So this storm is going to be quite a rainmaker. We're going to be looking at potential flash flooding for those particular islands. And on Sunday, we are also watching the shuttle launch. That is going to happen about 4:30 on Sunday afternoon. Of course, weather is a major player when it comes to the launch of the shuttle. They're really concerned about clouds, and they're also concerned about thunderstorms in the area. So let's take a look at what the models are saying in that particular region. We'll put this into motion, and you can see a lot of clouds in the area over Florida. Now, more clouds in the morning, and you can see this area blue. Let's watch the clock go through 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You see this area of blue here. They're expecting rain over the area. That is going to be a problem. Again, they do not want rain, they do not want thunderstorms, and they need about a 20-mile window outside of Cape Canaveral to make sure that this is not going to happen. But we'll be watching this very carefully.
$1 billion facility, but now we have this postponement for 24 hours because of the weather not cooperating with NASA. And speaking of the weather, let's get the global weather forecast, including the latest on the weather around Cape Canaveral. We're watching those live pictures there. Here's Martin Jeans. Martin, couldn't you do something about that weather?
I wish I had that power, you know, Relitza. I don't. You know, as we check our computer graphic across Florida, this is how it'll shape up. On Sunday, we're flying under the clouds. There's Florida, the southeast U.S. There's the Kennedy Space Center. And look what's all around, an awful lot of blue indicating rain and some really heavy rain. At times, that will be right across the Kennedy Space Center. Not good news at all. And, you know, as Relitza mentioned, the weather obviously a crucial factor here because NASA will not launch the shuttle if there are storms 23 miles from the shuttle runway, and certainly not looking at all promising on Sunday. Actually, as we take a look into Monday and Tuesday next week, the conditions across Florida are looking a lot more hopeful. The rain should be easing then. The rain is not easing in the Eastern Caribbean. Here's one of our main weather stories in the world this weekend, a tropical storm, the fifth of the Atlantic hurricane season. It's Ernesto. It is moving through the Eastern Caribbean. The computer not quite catching up. The wind's near the center, actually, about 85 kilometers an hour. So it's actually strengthening just a little bit now, those gusts over 100. We all want to know the forecast track. Well, certainly over the next few hours, it will be moving south of Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Very heavy rain in here, potential for flash flooding. And there's the forecast track. We're running it now through to early next week. It doesn't look good at all for Jamaica. Some heavy rain likely here. It will be a tropical storm, we think, as it moves close by or even across Jamaica, and then becoming a hurricane, a Category 1 hurricane approaching the Cayman Islands, the western side of Cuba, seeing very heavy rain. And beyond this point, into next week, we could be dealing with quite a powerful hurricane in the central region of the Gulf of Mexico. We'll have more on that big storm later. Back to our forecasts now all around the world.
Atlantis am Sonntag in Florida wird durch heraufziehende Gewitter gefährdet. Eine Sprecherin der US-Raumfahrtbehörde NASA schätzte die Chancen für einen Start auf 40%. Das Space Shuttle soll wichtige Teile für den Ausbau der internationalen Raumstation ISS ins All transportieren. Bislang hält die NASA an dem morgigen Termin fest. Sollte es zum Start kommen, überträgt NTV ab 22:30 Uhr live.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is our briefing on the postponement of launch STS-115 with Atlantis. Here to talk about the circumstances surrounding the postponement is Leroy Kane, the Launch Integration Manager for the Space Shuttle program and the Chairman of the Mission Management Team. Mike Leinbach, the Space Shuttle Launch Director here at the Kennedy Space Center. And U.S. Air Force First Lieutenant Caleb Norgren from the 45th Weather Squadron at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. And we'll begin first with Leroy Kane. Leroy?
Okay, well, thanks, George. It's a good afternoon to be here with you. We had our mission management team meeting this afternoon, and yesterday, if you were here, you know, we had some pretty violent storms in the area, and as we often do in the summertime in Florida. As a result of those storms, we took a lightning strike out at the launch pad. We frequently take lightning strikes at the launch pads. In this case, of course, with the vehicle there, we have systems in place to protect. The catenary lightning system did its job, essentially. However, we did see a couple of indications that makes us want to go look at the ground systems and the flight systems of the vehicle to make sure that we don't have any problems before we go fly. At this point, we don't have enough data yet to really know whether or not we have any problems. We have one indication on one of the ground systems on the vent arm, the ET vent arm, but we don't know yet whether it's a real indication or instrumentation, or whether it was outside of some kind of limit that would create a problem for us. We also have an indication on the flight vehicle on the orbiter, an indication on one of the Essential 1 BC bus that is showing us slightly out of above a limit. But again, it was an 80 millisecond data sample, and it's not enough information to go on for us to be able to make any decisions about the health at this point to clear the health of the ground systems or the flight systems. What we do know is that we took a significant lightning strike. My understanding is, based on the data that folks have collected, is we think it may be the largest lightning strike in terms of the current at somewhere in the order of 100 killiamps. So that's 100,000 amps. So based on that information, what we decided today at the mission management team is we know just enough to know that we don't know enough to be able to press on into a launch situation tomorrow. And that is exactly how I would put it to you. I know that I took a significant lightning strike. I know I have some indications it could be real. It could indicate that I need to do some retest, or may not. But frankly, what I heard today was that the guys need some more time, both with the ground systems and the flight systems, to be able to go off and look at their data. So we did, after hearing the story, decide to officially scrub the launch for 24 hours, essentially hold the countdown, and Mike Lundbach is here, and he can talk to you about the implications of that, as well as what our forward plan is once we determine what the forward plan is, how we go implement that. We do have the launch countdown status that Mike can give you. As far as where we are with the launch period, nothing has changed. We will come back tomorrow and review the data and review the forward plan, and we'll determine from there whether or not we can go pick up essentially where we leave off today and make a launch attempt on Monday, or if there's some other course of action that we need to take in terms of a forward plan. Did we have some video of,
yes, we've got some
of the lightning that we might be able to show? I believe the time on the screen you're seeing is a GMT time that equates to something just before 2 p.m. yesterday Eastern time. Okay, so I don't know how well you can see that, and we can play it again, and the folks have, I'm sure, some other video and stills of it, but that's a status of where we are. We're going to let the teams go off and work the plans. We were concerned that we wouldn't know enough to be able to come back in tonight. I did press pretty hard to see if it made sense in any way, shape, or form to reconvene the team later today in an attempt to see if we might be able to still have a viable launch opportunity for tomorrow. And based on everything I heard, it was pretty clear to me that we need to let the folks go off and look at their data.
So that's what we're going to do, and we have a launch period here that allows us to go do that, and several days after tomorrow, where we'll still have an opportunity to go launch. We need to make sure we have a good ground and flight system to go do that. So the mission management team will reconvene tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. And we'll see where we are. So with that, I'll let Mike give the open comments.
Okay, thanks. Let me take you back about 24 hours ago, maybe a little bit less than that, when we were here yesterday afternoon and we reported the lightning strike. At the time, we didn't have a heck of a lot of data, as I told you. The pad was still cleared because of the lightning advisory that we were under. And so our procedures say that we need to get out of the lightning advisories before we go out there and start collecting the data that's physically captured at the end of the catenary wire that connects to the top of that lightning mast that you saw the lightning actually hit. And so we did that overnight. Actually, we did it on third shift this morning and started reviewing the data. The Kennedy Space Center has always had a lightning committee for as long as I can remember, and I go back quite a few years. Chairman Terry Willingham, his folks looked at the data. Charlie Abner, the chief processing engineer for shuttle processing, and John Cipoletti for the United Space Alliance were all in a room together looking at the data. And that's where we first found some data that caused us to suspect that we may have had not a hit to the vehicle. It was certainly not a hit to the vehicle. I want to make that perfectly clear. The lightning arresting system did its job. But you can get an induced voltage field around a lightning strike, and that's what we're off looking at now to make sure that the indications that we have, the data that we have now recovered and we're analyzing, is real, as Leroy said. And then if it is, what to do as far as retests that may be required on the vehicle and the ground systems to prove that it's good to go. So those reviews are going on now. We recommended to the mission management team that we give the engineers 24 hours to go off and do those detailed analyses. So we really concurred in that plan, and therefore we're into the 24-hour stand down. That data analysis will continue all afternoon today. I suspect we'll get back together as a launch team tonight and review the data and see where the team has gotten to. The one area of concern to us right now, or not concern yet, but of suspicion to us, is that the hydrogen vent arm, where it connects to the external tank from the fixed service structure, there's a pyrotechnic device at that location that separates the vent arm right at liftoff. And so we need to check that pyro. We're putting together the plan to go do that. We did have one indication at that location. We had an instrumentation readout there that we may have exceeded our ground limit for induced voltage. And so that's the type of detailed analysis we're doing and putting together the retest plan. Right now, that's the only system on the ground side that we suspect we're going to have to go and look at. Although the team is again pouring through reams and reams of data as we speak to make sure that there's nothing else out there. We've asked all the systems, all the projects that make up the shuttle system, in addition to the ground, but the flight systems, to go off and review their data to make sure that they're comfortable proceeding on with the launch countdown. And that's going to take the better part of the 24 hours. And so that's why we suggested we just give the team time to go off and look in a unhurried manner and make sure that the data proves that we're good to go, or we're going to have to do some retest. And we'll see where that leads us this afternoon and tonight. So again, yesterday afternoon, significant strike to the top of the lightning protection system. The system did exactly as it was designed. We don't feel there's any problems with the orbiters. There is that one indication on one of the essential buses that the orbiter project's going to want to go off and verify. And we'll report back to you as soon as we know anything more.
All right, thank you, Mike. We're ready to take questions now. Please give your name and affiliation when the microphone comes to you. All right, we'll start right here in the front.
Hi, Robert Goss, Interspace News. Should this be a situation that requires repairs, about how long would this take?
It really depends on how many repairs we conclude we have to do. We have a procedure that we run every time we have a lightning strike out the launch pad, whether there's a vehicle there or not. Obviously, with a vehicle, it kicks in an extra set of checks. But it depends on how many systems we think we may have suspicious data on. Right now, it's just that one at the hydrogen vent arm on the ground side.
The guys are putting together that plan. I hesitate to tell you how long it'll take because right now we have not reviewed that plan in detail. It's not a heck of a long time. I think a 24-hour stand down is probably sufficient for that. But again, if our data review turns up something more that we have to go look at, we'll go look at it, and however long that takes, it'll take. So again, we don't have that timeline for you. The guys are putting it together now. We're going to get into a situation again this afternoon that Caleb can talk to you about, where the pad will be cleared again for lightning this afternoon, and so that will impact our ability to go out there and do the work that we need to do to clear the system. So that factors into how long it will take. It's not just the physical work on the hydrogen vent arm, it's also being able to work on the hydrogen vent arm. Seth?
Seth Bornstein, Associated Press. Maybe I didn't hear right. I thought Leroy talked about one of the buses with the 80 millisecond. Is that the same one as the hydrogen vent arm, or is that something different, right? And can you go through what would need to, if there's a problem with there, when you go through that, what kind of chain swap outs would you need? What kind of time? And what makes it a problem? I mean, what are you looking for? What are the parameters that say this is bad and this isn't?
Yeah. Well, I'll comment on that, and then Mike may want to follow up as well. But the orbiter, on the orbiter side, we do have data insight into the buses in terms of voltages and currents and things of that nature. One of the voltage readings on one of the buses, it's called Essential 1 BC, indicated that the voltage was slightly above the limit by a couple of tenths of volts. All of the main buses, as you know, we have the three main buses, main A, B, and C. All of the indications on those buses were nominal, and we didn't see anything there that causes us any alarm. So exactly what we would need to do, Seth, in terms of changing systems out or testing the bus and that kind of thing, that's precisely what we're asking the folks to go off and look at least in part, for the rest of the day and evening tonight, is to determine, based on the data that we do have, do we have any indications that we may have compromised one of the systems that bus feeds, and or the bus itself, for example. And if so, then we'd have to talk about if there's a test that we can do that's already in existing procedures, then we would go do that. If there isn't, then if we can come up with a test, or again, changing out hardware. But those are things that are in front of us in terms of options. Those are the kinds of things we would go look at.
I mean, just to follow up on a worst-case scenario, and you had to change out hardware, you're looking at quite a long. I mean, how long ahead are you looking at for something like that?
We're really looking at this. We're going to follow the data wherever it leads us. Right now, I don't have enough data to know what our course of action should be, and that is exactly why we're going off and doing the work. What are the possibilities? They're probably endless. It's potentially anywhere from coming back tomorrow and deciding that we've verified the systems are okay and launching, or having to delay the launch for 1 or 2 or some number of days longer than that. Frankly, we have procedures, and Mike can talk a little bit about the procedures in terms of the time that they take, but we're really not thinking about that at this point so much as we are just trying to figure out, in terms of following the data, if you will, in terms of understanding what systems were impacted, and if so, how. And then in some cases we have documented procedures, and in some we don't. So I wouldn't want to speculate on how long it's going to take, because I don't even have enough data to give you a good answer on that, quite frankly.
All right, let's come over here. Just go to the back to this next row. We'll go back here. Bill Harwood, sitting down here.
Harwood, CBS. Maybe for Mike, or maybe for Leroy. You started to say you thought this was the largest, and then you kind of diverged there. Largest strike you've ever taken at a pad, I assume you're saying, with a 100 kiloamp spike. Number one, and for Mike, the lightning plan that's normally on the books, right, that's 96 hours, and I know that I'm right. I mean, am I right about that? And then I guess with the count going, some of that stuff you do anyway, and I just want to try to get how you can understand how you would compress that to make Monday, if it turns out that's possible.
Yeah, you're right. You're right about the 96-hour retest. If we have to retest everything on the orbiter and the solid rocket boosters in the external tank and the ground system, that requires 96 hours. We see only one indication so far that would require a retest. And so while our plan is built to test everything, we're not going to test everything if we don't need to. That's precisely why Leroy said we're going to follow the data and do what the data tells us to do. We're not going to go into a full retest of the entire stack if we don't need to. And so it's built that way on purpose so that we can pick and choose the things we need to go after to go retest. That's as good as I can do for you.
Yeah, and was it the largest strike you guys recorded? And I also heard, and this may be related to the hydrogen vent arm pyro, I heard there was a smell of some charring at the pad. There was something like that at the pad. Can you talk about that?
Yes, we had walk-downs this morning as part of the procedure to go inspect systems at the pad. Some of the techs and engineers did smell what they reported as some sort of a charred smell or that type of thing up at the hydrogen vent arm. Another reason we need to go out there and look at the system. That check will be picking up here shortly, assuming the weather permits it. That's going to be a visual check. We'll open up some cable trays to make sure there's nothing burned down inside. But whenever we get a report like that, we're going to run that one to ground as well. So that should be in work here shortly.
Okay, Tracy Watson.
Tracy Watson, USA Today for Leroy Kane. Or Lifeline Walk, I'm not sure which. I want to make sure I understand what might have been affected by the voltage at the vent arm. Are you worried that the pyro may have fired because of the voltage? If you could clarify that for me.
Sounds like you can take that one, Mike.
We are 99.9% sure the pyro did not fire. However, we need to go check the circuitry that sends the signals to fire the pyro, verify that the pyro didn't fire, but we don't suspect it fired. But again, that's why we have to go out and look at it. To do that work itself, the guys again are laying out that plan. It's probably several hours to go out there to demate the proper connectors, to isolate that string of the ordnance system from the vehicle itself. We need to get it off of the orbiter systems in order to do the work on it, as it were. So we need to demate it, then do our checks, and remate, and get back into count.
You're definitely going to take those steps. You're not going to do more data search before you do that actual physical check. Is that correct?
The continuing work on the data goes on in parallel with developing the retest plan at the pad. Right now, I would fully expect we're going to go do some work up at the hydrogen vent arm. I can't tell you right now precisely what it is, though.
Okay, Mark.
Mark Carreau, Houston Chronicle for Leroy Kane. On the orbiter side, what are the systems that depend on that bus circuitry? And do you know roughly where that is? Is that something accessible, for instance, from a launch pad, or is that something that's deeper?
Well, let's see, Mark, one of the primary systems that would be impacted would be fuel cell 1 in this case. The essential buses provide some power for the fuel cells in terms of the controllers and whatnot. Access, I don't know whether or not we have access to the buses at the pad. And so that's some of the things that we would go look into and ask questions. You know, it strikes me a little bit, and I was kind of was thinking about this when Mike was answering the last question. Some of this sounds a good bit like the MNT meeting that we had. Because you're asking a lot of the questions that I asked, and the answer to them is, in a lot of cases, we don't know yet, because again, we have enough data to know that we have some things we need to go look at, but we really, because it's such a comprehensive search that we have to go do in terms of verifying which systems were affected and which ones weren't, it just takes some time to go do that. And it became clear to me during the meeting that we have to give the folks time to go do that.
But Mark, I don't know if we have access to Essential 1BC, the bus itself, if you will, in the pad configuration. But that's a question that we'll go get an answer to it as a matter of course here doing this work.
Okay, Marty, you got a quick follow-up?
Yeah, a quick follow-up. I just want to make sure. I think this was sort of early on. We may have been characterizing this as a one-day delay, but I think what you're telling us is it's 1 day so far until you can examine the data more and decide what, if anything, more you need to do. So it isn't cut and dried that this is a 1 day stand down.
Yeah, somebody was talking about before we came over here, and I didn't agree with the sequence of words that they used when they characterized it. We have scrubbed for 24 hours, and we're going to have an MMT meeting at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning to determine if we can pick up at some point that Mike tells us is the right place to pick up in the countdown for a launch attempt on Monday. And then we will listen to the engineering team and what their assessment is of the problems, if there are any that they've determined that we have on either the ground systems and or the flight systems. And from there, we'll follow that data and determine whether or not we're in a posture to be able to go try to launch. And if we are, Mike will tell us how to get from here to there. And if we're not, then we'll go figure out how much more time we need to be able to get from tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock to the next viable launch attempt. So we're in a 24-hour scrub. I fully, as far as I'm concerned, it's entirely possible we come back tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, and if the guys have enough data to verify that all the systems are checked out, and the ones that we need to go check out we can do within the time frame that we have, and we can safely proceed to launch on Monday, I think that's a very possible outcome of this. I just don't know if that's where we'll get to, but it's certainly very possible as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, let's come down here to Jay.
This is for Mike Kalambach. I wasn't working, Mike, and you may have covered this, but refresh my memory. The pyros on the beanie cap, are they to blow away a stuck swing arm? What's the function there?
On the beanie cap, Jay?
Did I understand the hearing coming over here that that's where the pyros were? Where's the pyros that you're concerned about?
No, the pyros we're concerned about are at the hydrogen vent arm, not the GOX vent arm.
Okay. All right, thank you.
All right, let's come right here to this gentleman with the cap.
John Johnson, LA Times. Is there any way to characterize what 100 kiloamps is compared to something that something that laymen might understand? What is that? How does that compare to any other electrical system we might know?
That's a good question. I'm not an electrical engineer. My background is aerospace. My father wouldn't be very proud of me because he's an electrician by trade. But I don't know offhand personally what would be comparable to 100,000 amps. Mike?
No.
It's a lot of current.
All right, let's go back here to Todd. Todd Halverson in the back row back here.
Thanks. Todd Halverson of Florida Today. For Leroy, I'm wondering what type of test, if needed, you would typically do to exonerate an electrical bus on the orbiter. And for Caleb, I'm wondering what the weather looks like beyond Tuesday.
Okay, Todd, and I'm gonna volley that one to Mike. He's the guy to answer the question on what kind of tests we would do on the ground systems for sure, and he probably has more insight to the vehicle as well, but I'll follow up after he answers.
There's a variety of tests that we could perform, ranging from continuity to obviously powering up the vehicle, see how that works. Obviously, we're gonna do the less intrusive test first. There's a TDR test where we could send current down the line and see where a fault may be if we suspect we have a fault. There are high pot tests we can run where we send a high wattage down the line to see the return, to see if that indicates anything. There's a variety of tests we can run on the electrical side. Again, I'm mechanical, so I'm not electrical. So maybe Caleb's electrical too, in addition to being the weather forecaster.
Unfortunately, no, I'm not. But you're asking for after Tuesday?
First, I'd just talk about Monday. Monday, not a lot's changed from Miss Winter's forecast this morning. We're still looking at a 20% probability of KSC weather permitting launch. So what's happening is we're transitioning out of, by Monday, we'll have the high pressure ridge will be to our north, and that'll give a southeasterly flow. So that should push all these thunderstorms, the sea breeze, everything should be inland. So Monday looks good. That's preliminary. We're still looking at the weather as far as you're talking about after Tuesday. Wednesday is going to be more of a transition day where we begin to see that ridge migrate back to the south. It's still a ways out, but as far as Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I think we're going to start to see that ridge slide to our south, and maybe we'll get more of what we've had the last couple of days. We get more of that southwesterly flow that kind of gives us all our thunderstorms. But again, that's something we have to go back and look at closely. But as far as for Monday, we're looking good.
All right, let's go to Tarek.
Thank you. Tarek Malik with Space.com and Space News, I think, from Mike. You mentioned earlier, of course, you've got that 96-hour plan in place for the entire launch deck if you have to retest, but of course you're not going to go, you're only going to test what you need to. I'm curious how that breaks down between like the orbiter, the tank, the boosters, what takes up the bulk of that time, or is it all interrelated?
Yeah, that 96 hours, if we get driven there, and again, no one expects we'll have to do that full retest. But you retest several systems, several vehicle components in parallel, so it's not strictly a serial test to the orbiter and then the tank and then the boosters. It's a lot of parallel work, so we've compressed it as much as we can from a parallel perspective. But again, we're going to pick and choose out of that full suite of retests the ones that we need to go do to prove that the vehicle is safe to fly.
Okay, Stephen.
Stephen Young with SpaceflightNow.com for Mike. Could you just describe the access to the ET vent arm? Is it all fairly easy to get to? And the weather is obviously going to play a factor, but is there anything you can do remotely, or is this really a hands-on check that you need to do out there?
It's a hands-on check that we need to do at the vent arm where it connects to the external tank. To get access to that area, there's a platform that's about 3 stories tall that we need to swing out from the fixed service structure to get you right up next to the connection of the hydrogen vent arm to the tank itself. That's in work right now, and as soon as we get that access established, and if the weather is good, we'll go start doing our inspections. The inspection at the haunch area, where we had that slight smell of smoke, we can get to that right now. That's back on the fixed service structure. No special access needed for that area.
And I'll just mention as a follow-up on that, part of what went into to my thinking today and the team's thinking today in this situation is that exactly what Mike just talked about was we've got weather today that we're dealing with. So part of our challenge in understanding this problem is access and how much access we're going to have in the next 6 or 8 or 10 hours. And so Mike and his team looked at it enough this morning to know, in their experience, that we really need more than 12 hours to get the MMT back together, for example, and still try to maintain a launch attempt for tomorrow. So it's an example of a case where we really rely heavily on the experience of Mike Leinbach and his team to be able to come in with recommendations to the mission management team. And this is a perfect example of one where it's complicated by, in fact, the weather that we're having today. So I just wanted to mention that certainly was a factor in the decision today.
Okay, Irene.
Irene Potts with Reuters for Leroy, and this probably is more for the flight director part of you. I'm just curious how, with a launch attempt a couple days or a day or so later, that tropical storm likely will be a hurricane, and yet the predictions of where it would strike would still kind of be uncertain. And I'm just really not getting a handle on how you take the unpredictability of a strike forecast and factor that into a decision about whether to fly or not and risk, the possible MCC shutdown and so forth. Just if you could just talk a little bit about how you try and put some, boundaries on that and account for that sort of uncertainty.
Okay, it is a difficult thing to do. But we're kind of in the business of doing it all the time. Mike Sefferdini was here with me yesterday, the Space Station Program Manager, and you heard him talk a little bit about we're 24/7 on the space station side from a mission control
manning standpoint, and so this is part of what they do, and it's part of what their thinking is day in and day out. As far as the shuttle is concerned, we don't handle it that much differently than we do for any kind of storms that we consider rolling back from the pad for example. We try to make the best decisions we can with the data that we have when it's time to make a decision. And where these storms are concerned, we generally err on the side of conservatism. If we had a storm that was in the Gulf right now, it would give us significant pause if it was clearly heading toward one of our centers. And in fact, we're looking at those kinds of things in talking with the ET project and their corporate counterparts today. They have a plan, as you know, for the machine assembly facility to button things up and safe the critical flight hardware there in the event that we end up with a storm in the Gulf that could threaten that area. And they're looking very closely at that in terms of, for example, a Friday of this week landfall in that area. At what point would they need to button things up? And just like you and me, you have to have enough lead time there to let your people go home and button things up at home too, and then have them get to a safe place away from the storm. So we are considering those things already, and it's not just for Houston and the Mission Control Center or here at Kennedy Space Center where we have the launch team and the launch vehicle, but it's also the rest of the Gulf Coast for the machine assembly facility and the Stennis Space Center along the Mississippi coast there. So that's the best way I can answer your question, is that we could look at it continuously. We don't let our guard down, and when it comes time to make a decision, we make the best decision we can make based on the data that's in front of us. And it's never easy with these storms because there's a lot of uncertainty. Great.
Two questions. First, just a quick follow, Leroy, on that. If it does shape up that Michoud or Stennis could be in for a hard hit, that in itself could be a slip factor here. And then secondly, big picture, in terms of lightning strikes, if this one was about 100,000 amps, what's a typical good strike here? And about how many per year do you get on pads A and B, whether there's a vehicle out there or not?
Okay. Once see, I'll parse it out a little bit. The question on Michoud and Stennis, we don't know where we are today relative to the likelihood of the storms that are in the areas, but we're watching them very closely. And as I said, I talked to the ET project and the corporate counterparts today, and they're watching it very closely. It takes some time to get flight hardware saved and to get people and assets out of harm's way. It would be significant to us if we should have a strong storm impact that area again. And in more ways, I would tell you, than for the flight that's in our immediate future here of STS-115, the 12A mission. So we have taken steps to safeguard the plant since Katrina and the other hurricanes that impacted us a couple of years ago, in terms of hardening the systems there a little bit, and in terms of spending some money on the infrastructure and the pumping systems there that help keep that facility safe and dry and keep the flight hardware from being contaminated even for large storms. So we have taken very proactive steps to protect ourselves the best way we know how. But as you point out, if that area gets hit with a strong storm, it would be an impact to us. I have no idea how big of an impact, but it would, in all likelihood, be more than a single mission impact. As far as the lightning strikes, I don't know what an average lightning strike power signature is, and I'm not familiar with the numbers, but this is,
I've been told this is the lightning capital of the country anyway, maybe the world, and Caleb has probably got some more expertise on those questions.
As far as a typical lightning bolt, we're fairly good at saying when we're going to have lightning, but as far as the strength of the bolt, I'm not sure how to check on that. And as far as kind of, Florida is the lightning capital of the U.S., and kind of from Tampa to Titusville is kind of what we call lightning alley. That's where we get, so even here in Florida, that's kind of like the majority of lightning is from Tampa to Titusville. And I don't know if there's any other, that's all I have on that.
All right, we're going to stop here. We've got another piece of video to show you of a lightning strike, and then we're going to wrap it up. So if we can go ahead and roll that video, we've got one additional piece of video here. All right, all right, with that, we're going to conclude. We do hope to have a press briefing tomorrow after the mission management team meeting is over, particularly if there are any further developments that we're going to have to pursue. Thank you very much.
It's time now for a look at the international weather forecast with Kevin Corriveau, who's joining us from the Weather Center. Hi, Kevin. Tell us now, where is Ernesto in the Caribbean? Who's been affected by it?
Well, Dominican Republic and Haiti have definitely been affected by this particular storm. As you saw on the satellite, you can see quite a bit of clouds right here. A lot of rain is falling on that southern coast of the Dominican Republic here, as well as Haiti. Jamaica is located right here. They're also getting some rain, and it is starting to come into that very eastern tip of Cuba right here. Now, the problem is, when we talk about a hurricane, the forward right quadrant of the hurricane, so that means this side of the hurricane is always the strongest. Guantanamo Bay is going to be in the part that is going to be affected by the strongest part of the hurricane. They're going to see the winds not as strong as it would be towards the center of the storm, but storm surge is going to be a big thing because as the circulation of the storm turns counterclockwise, that water is going to be pushing up against that southerly coast this way. So they're going to be seeing a little bit more exaggerated storm surge in that particular area. Rain-wise, you can see over the last 24 hours quite a bit of rain, like I said, in that southern coast of the Dominican Republic as well as Haiti. They could be seeing flash flooding. The Dominican Republic is notorious for the deforestation in that area, and they have seen mudslides with previous storms in the past. Right now, we have 121 kilometers per hour. Over the last 6 hours, that really hasn't changed in intensity, but within the next hour, we do get our next bulletin, so we will be watching that. Like we said, a Category 2 possibly as it makes its way onshore. It will start to decrease in intensity across the island of Cuba, come back out into the Gulf of Mexico, start to affect the Keys, and then we probably see the system come back up in intensity as it gets into this warmer water, possibly a Category 2. Now, what we're concerned about is as it makes its way across the Gulf of Mexico, where is it going to land in Florida? We're not really sure. It's going to be taking kind of a parallel track along the coast. So I think anywhere from the southern part of Florida all the way up to the Panhandle could be affected by this system over the next several days. The shuttle launch, well, that is also going to be affected on what happens with the storm. You know, they have postponed this till Tuesday because of thunderstorms down in the area. Tuesday is probably the last window that they're going to have because on Wednesday, then the storm starts to come up. Take a look at the precipcast. You notice that area blue just down here on the corner. That is the storm coming up, and by Wednesday, that storm is in close proximity. So if they don't get the shuttle out on Tuesday, they will probably have to wait a considerable amount of time to try a shuttle launch again. And across Europe, we're seeing still a lot of rain through that central part of Europe. Excuse me. You notice that through most of Germany right here, that has stayed in the last couple days. A front has just pushed through parts of Italy, so they are finally going to start to clear out. And now let's look at other city forecasts around the world.
As mentioned, plans to launch the U.S. space shuttle are on hold. NASA is saying Atlantis will not take off now until at least Tuesday. That will give engineers more time to determine if a lightning strike on Friday damaged the spacecraft.
My understanding is, based on the data that folks have collected, is we think it may be the largest lightning strike in terms of the current at somewhere in the order of 100 killiamps. So that's 100,000 amps.
But there's also the growing threat of Hurricane Ernesto, which could mean no launch at all in the week to come. The shuttle was set to take off Sunday for the International Space Station.
put it back into the huge vehicle assembly building. It's a very slow process. They would also need some lead time, about 40 to 48 hours to get this done. I think we're seeing some video of it rolling out. It goes less than 1 mile per hour, or gosh, I guess that would be barely over 1.5 kilometers per hour. As it goes out and back from the launch pad 39B, it's a very tedious, slow process on that crawler transporter. So we're going to have to wait and see. They are planning to have a briefing sometime tonight in the next, I would say, 3 to 4 hours or so, Relisa.
And Daniel, what is the mission of Atlantis?
Yeah, it's kind of gotten lost over the last few days, all this talk of lightning strikes and weather. But really, of course, the goal with all of the shuttle missions going forward, and there are about another 15 or so between now and 2010, is the complete assembly of the International Space Station. One of the keys to that on this mission are these huge solar arrays that on day 6 will be unfurled. Cost about $372 million for this payload. And eventually these solar arrays will provide about 1/4 of the power to the International Space Station. That's roughly the power equivalent to a small subdivision of homes. And even a veteran of space shuttle missions like the Commander Brent Jett hopes that he will have a front row seat to see this happen.
Professionally, you know, when those arrays come out, that's going to be the highlight of the mission for me. I mean, that's why we're going. We get those arrays out without any problems, and I'll be very happy at that point.
So, of course, all of this adds to a little bit of pressure here for NASA to try and get this off the ground sooner than later. This launch window extends for several more days, but there are some other complications with the Russians and a Soyuz rocket. There are a lot of variables, needless to say here. They are certainly hoping that they can go up Tuesday, and they will have to make a decision sometime in the next several hours. Relisa, back to you.
Yes, the crew has to be very patient as it waits. Daniel Siever.
A little anxious.
And you have to be very patient, too. Thank you very much.
Welcome to our status on mission STS-115. I have with me tonight Leroy Kane, the Launch Integration Manager for the Space Shuttle Program, Mike Suffredini, the International Space Station Program Manager, Mike Leinbach, our Shuttle Launch Director, and Air Force First Lieutenant Caleb Nordgren, representing the Weather Squadron with a weather update. And we'll begin with a statement from Leroy.
Okay, thanks very much. Good to be here again with y'all. We've been pretty busy since we were last here to talk to you, and I know that Bill Gerstmeyer was here this afternoon to give you an update of the work that has been ongoing by the team. A couple of big items that I'll just give you some status on. Of course, we've been watching the storm very closely in the development of that storm and the potential for impacts to us, Ernesto. And we worked quite a bit on it today, starting very early this morning. And so I'll talk to you a little bit about that and what it means to us as of now, as well as Michael Leinbach can speak to impacts in terms of processing options and the parallel paths that we're going down right now to maintain our options as we head toward T0 on Tuesday. The other big item, of course, is we've been working really hard on clearing the vehicle for the lightning strike that we took, and the team, it really was a magnificent effort in the last 24, 36 hours, and I'm happy to say that we've been able to clear the vehicle with respect to concerns for the lightning strike, and I'll give you a few details on that, and then just a final couple updates on a few status items and where we go from here. But for Ernesto, as I get ready to talk about it a little bit, I think we have a video clip from Space Station that shows the current Ernesto storm. Our friends on orbit supplied this for us, obviously. Gives you a good idea of the magnitude of the storm. And it's still building, of course. So early this morning, we started looking closer, as I said, at Ernesto and what it meant to us from the standpoint of having a vehicle to launch pad, as well as the other things that we look at for hurricanes. And earlier today, we were thinking that we might have to make a decision today
and to whether or not to head into rollback preparations in order to get the vehicle and our people out of harm's way. And as we went through the day and got subsequent updates, we determined later on this afternoon, really early this evening, that we could wait until tomorrow morning to make that decision based on the current timetable and the current speed of the storm and all of the factors that go into us being able to get off the launch pad safely if we have to go that direction. So where we are as of now is we're going to look at the storm again tonight, and we plan to get together early tomorrow morning and take a final look. And based on the current timetable, we plan to make our decision one way or the other by 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. And the decision will be specifically to start into rollback preparations, principally beginning with PRSD offload of the cryogenics on board. And Mike can talk more about that. And then either we'll do that or we'll continue to head toward T0 on Tuesday. So those are the two options that we're looking at, and we're going to watch the storm and make a decision in the morning. With respect to the SRB pyro issue that we worked on and the associated systems that we were, as you remember, we had cleared the vehicle from the standpoint of the orbiter and RSRM and ET and the ground systems. And the thing that we were not able to clear because we were lacking data from the SRB was in particular the SRB PIC system that we were concerned about. And the folks went off and took an integrated look at it and basically were able to determine that it really wouldn't be possible for the SRB or the associated PIC systems to have seen anything with respect to the lightning strike based on the data that we do have on the rest of the stack by virtue of the fact that the whole stack is bolted together. And looking at the data that we have on the orbiter and the ET and the other systems, and which basically act as a sensor collection system for the whole stack, if you will, in terms of the environment. So they went off and essentially created what the SRB environment must have been based on what the rest of the vehicle elements and the ground systems were seeing. And we had lightning experts, we had all of the expertise that we were able to bring in on the subject, and the conclusion we came to at the mission management team today was that we were able to clear the vehicle with respect to the lightning strike, and so that we are able to stay on track for a T0 and launch on Tuesday from a vehicle standpoint. So that was very good news for us, and it was one of those cases, and we keep seeing these kind of cases where if we let this team go do what it does best in terms of following the data and coming up with the best way to approach a problem, we are able to be successful time and time again, so really proud of the team. Another thing we did today was to status the external tank processing at Michoud Assembly Facility. As you know, with the storm heading into the Gulf, we could potentially be impacted there as well. So good news for KSC is bad news for Michoud and vice versa with respect to the hurricane, but that is as it goes with these storms. And so we got a good update on the status there. The folks have very good preparation plans, which they are prepared to initiate as early as Tuesday with respect to safing the hardware and allowing people to go home and get out of harm's way. And we think we have a real good forward plan there, and we think we have a good recovery plan with respect to those preparations and the safeguarding, if in fact we have to go down those paths in terms of backing out of that when we get folks back to work and able to continue on the tank. So that was a very good status. It was a good update for us, and the folks, we think, have a real good forward plan there. So overall, where we are headed right now is we will continue to look at the storm tonight. Mike and I and the weather experts will get together in the morning, and we will make a decision whether to head toward rollout preps or whether to continue in the countdown toward T0 on Tuesday afternoon. In the event that we're
we are able to continue toward T0 on Tuesday afternoon, then our next mission management team will be tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. And in that case, we'll just basically give a status of the storm and what our decision was in terms of not rolling back. And we would just go over a status with all the vehicle elements and projects on any issues that came up overnight, any new IPRs, basically processing status and the other things that we would normally do. So that's kind of the schedule as it is in front of us. I feel really good about the work that's going on the last couple of days, and it's a real credit to the entire team. So with that, I'd be ready to take questions if you don't have any other opening statements.
Okay, and I think we will go straight to your questions. So let's start with Mike Cabbage, who's standing on the wall there.
Mike Cabbage with the Orlando Sentinel. I've got a couple. First for Leroy, if when you look at the weather tomorrow morning, the forecast is pretty much identical to what it is now. What's likely to happen? Are you guys likely to roll back, or are you likely to try to fly? And for Mike, if the decision is made to roll back, what is the earliest you guys could possibly be back at the pad ready for a launch attempt? What's your earliest T0 you could probably have if you had to roll back later in September?
Okay, Mike, and it's a good question. Basically, with the current storm predictions, it would take a relatively significant change from the current forecast that we're seeing to prevent us from going into rollback preparation. And I would just put it to you that way. And if we see that, then if we see a change like that, then we'll press on. And if we don't, then we'll begin our rollback preparations. And of course, rollback preparations means just that. The vehicle would still physically be at the pad until Tuesday about noon when we actually jack the vehicle up and start doing the rollback. So we would continue to watch the storm all day Monday, Monday night, and early Tuesday, and could stay at the pad if after our initial decision there was a big change.
Okay, and relative to getting to our next launch attempt, if we do go down the path of rolling back, several things go into that. First of all is the timeline to get back to the VAB. Says we would be back safe and sound in the vehicle assembly building at about midnight Tuesday night. And we would stay in there as the storm passes, and then look around the center when we would come back out to the center and make sure there's no damage. We'd have to assess any kind of damage we might have, and then clear the vehicle and the launch pad and other systems to take the vehicle back out there. That might take a couple of days. The thing to remember is once we get back out to the launch pad for our next launch attempt from the configuration we're in now, we're 8 days away from a T0. And so to predict an earliest launch date is impossible, because I don't know how long I'm going to be in the VAB. I don't know how long I'm going to take to clean up the center, as it were, from any potential damage we might sustain. But once we do get out to the launch pad again, it's 8 days to T0.
Okay, Seth, right?
Seth Bornstein, Associated Press, for Leroy and Lieutenant Nordgren. I guess what I'm trying to understand here is how close was the decision not to make a decision. First, for Lieutenant Nordgren, was it the slowing down that's causing this? I mean, storms slow down and speed up. If it speeds up, are you going to? Do you still have enough time? Once the rollback decision is made, if it speeds up a few extra miles per hour, is there a chance that you'll be caught still with the shuttle on the path back when you see 46 miles per hour winds? What's the probability of getting caught if you wait until noon Tuesday?
Let's see. Let me take the first part. Initially, early this morning, we were looking at forward speed of the storm of 12 knots, and based on that, we determined that we would have to make a decision by 2300 tonight to meet our timeline. And then later in the day, it became clear that we could use a number like 11 knots. And really, Michael Einbach is the right guy because he leads those discussions with the weather forecasters and the hurricane expertise. So I'll let him add on to that as well.
Okay, yeah, I'd be glad to. And after I'm done with Caleb, if you want to go over the storm itself for the folks, that would probably help out too. We protect a small amount of contingency time in our rollback preparations and the roll itself. And we do that on purpose in case we get some adverse weather during the roll that says we would have to clear the support crews away from the vehicle for a period of time. If we had lightning in the area, we'd have to clear the folks, we'd have to clear the folks out. So we do protect about 4 hours or so. Once we pick the vehicle up and start the rollback to the VAB, we have about 4 hours of contingency in there. So we feel like we're protected that way. We also use a fairly conservative track that Caleb and the folks give us from the 45th Weather Squadron, meaning that the track that they give us and the arrival of the 40-knot winds is a little on the conservative side also. And that protects for potential increase in the forward speed of the storm. So we average the speed of the storm over the next 24 to 36 hours, use that speed in our calculations for the arrival of the 40-knot. And again, there's a little bit of buffer in there because of a fairly conservative track towards us.
Sure, I'll go ahead and talk about the storm real quick. If I get, we have a graphic of the actual track, and we'll look at that. But real quick, just to start off, it went from a hurricane down to a tropical storm, and the reason that happened is it kind of hit the southwest tip of Haiti. And over there you have mountains, which mountains tend to kind of slow it down, rip it apart a little bit. And so that's why it went down to a tropical storm. Now as it leaves Haiti, we have a little bit of time before it hits Cuba, where it might see a little bit of strengthening. And then where it's hitting Cuba, there's a good chance, too, it's going to hit some mountainous areas, which could, again, it will take it probably down from a hurricane back down to a tropical storm. And then the key will be from Cuba to where it hits the west coast of Florida, how much does it strengthen in that time when it hits some of the warmer waters. And again, there's still a lot of uncertainty, and this is something we're going to watch closely. This is the National Hurricane Center's track, and it would put it as far as, south of Tampa, hitting around Wednesday afternoon, and then kind of going from Tampa up through Jacksonville. And you see Jacksonville, you're looking at 2 p.m. on Thursday. So as far as the biggest impact to us, you're looking, between 2 p.m. Wednesday and 2 p.m. Thursday, looking at that. As far as, we do give different probabilities to the launch team, and we factor in as far as not only what the current speed of the storm is, but we also give them that margin where we'll simulate if the storm was to speed up, and we'll give them those numbers as well. So as far as we take, a conservative approach, so we give them a lot of different numbers as far as if the storm was going this fast, all the way down to if it slowed down, so a wide range in that. And as far as right now, as far as off of our 40-knot simulation, probability of 40-knot sustained winds within 120 hours is 30%. I don't know if that kind of answers your questions for you. Yeah, go ahead, Seth, real quick.
That's 120 hours. What about probability by midnight Tuesday when you'd be safely in the VAB? In other words, what's the probability you get 40-knot winds before 11:59 p.m. Tuesday?
I'd have to, go back and look. Off the top of my head, I have no idea. But I'm telling you, as far as we do simulate, everything we simulate as far as faster speeding up, you're not going to see those winds. So the probability, you're looking really, low chance. I don't know the exact probability, but we're not looking for that to happen.
Again, the way we play that is we want to be in the VAB before the arrival of 40-knot winds, and so we build in some conservatisms in there. So to put a probability on exceeding that, that's not in our thought process because we firmly expect to be in the VAB before they get here.
Thank you. All right, Chris, second row. Or first row, I'm sorry. Okay.
Chris Kreisler from Florida Today. I guess it's two questions. One is for Mike. How confident are you that you would actually have a small launch window before September 7th or on September 7th for Mike Leinbach and for Mike Sofrodini? Have you talked yet with the Russian officials about wiggle room in that schedule?
Well, see, I'll go first. The chances of getting a launch attempt off before September 7th, if we stay at the launch pad, are pretty good. And so I say that a little tongue-in-cheek, but that's the right answer. It depends how far we go down the road of the rollback preparations and then decide as a team not to roll back, and we have to undo what we've done to prepare for rolling back. That still supports a launch attempt well within the September 7th.
And no. 12:30 tonight will be the first conversation.
All right, thanks. Now on the second row, Irene.
Irene Klotz with Reuters for Mike Sofrodini. Could you talk a little bit about the CSCS option and how, if the storm doesn't affect Florida but may affect Michoud, with the uncertainty in the arrival of the tank, how that would play into a launch decision?
Well, let's see, Leroy will have to answer the tank question, but what I'll tell you is every day that we delay the launch, we buy back time on orbit for CSCS because the 3 crew on orbit you consume a third of the total logistics required for the bigger crew. So as we sit on the ground, we tend to get a little better in terms of CSCS because then the window shortens. Now, Leroy will have to talk about the tank ratings.
Okay, yeah, and from an external tank standpoint, if we have impacts at Michoud from the storm, the team looked at 3 different scenarios really, and 2 of those 3 scenarios would result in different delivery dates of the tank. And essentially what we would do is we would have the tank shipped here with some work to do on it, and we could complete that work such that really ultimately the impact to from a launch on need standpoint is it would basically use up the couple of days of margin that we have right now. As you'll recall, when we were here the other day, we talked about our CSCS capability and our launch on need capability, and we had 7 or 8 days of overlap. And at that time, we were down on the tank delivery on the order of 4 days, and so that left us about 4 days of margin. We would pretty much use up that margin, and we would ship some what we call traveled work with ET-123 to the Kennedy Space Center for it to be complete here. So it's essentially an impact that we could absorb, and that's how we would do that.
Okay, thank you. Tarek, against the wall, please. Right there.
Thank you. Tarek Malik for Space.com and Space News. I think for Leroy, we've been talking about, of course, the shuttle this whole time, and I'm just kind of curious about the crew themselves. I mean, here they are waiting for a launch, and it's a pretty I guess dynamic situation. And what are their thoughts? Have you talked to them? Have they kind of told you how they're feeling right now, kind of waiting on pins and needles?
Yeah, I have not talked to them personally, but I got an update before coming over here tonight, and talked with some folks who have talked to the crew. Of course, our crew is for the shuttle is here in quarantine and crew quarters, and they've been following along the discussions we've been having on the lightning strike issues as well as the storm. They were in some of the meetings that we had today. They were teleconned in, of course. And they're basically making good use of this time, is what I was told. The commander and pilot, I believe, are going to fly STA tomorrow, or maybe just T-38. They're going to fly tomorrow, and in addition to that, they're going to get some family time, as I understand it. So they're making good use of their time. As far as the station crew, and Mike may have an update, but what I was told was they have not been given an update on our current status as of developments of the day today, and the plan is to talk to them in the morning and give them an update and basically tell them what we're sharing with you all today. And if Mike has anything to add from the station, please.
So all these decisions we just talked about is past their bedtime, so we'll let them know in the morning.
Okay, Dan, right here on the front row.
Dan Billow from Channel 2 for Mike Leinbach. A couple questions, if I may. Mike, you're probably going to go into a rollback mode, but you're probably going to try to hang on by your fingernails and hope not to roll back, right? So you have until something like what is going to be something like noon at Tuesday or sometime in there to change your mind. You have until the crawler wheels start rolling. So what will it be on sometime on Tuesday that will be the straw that breaks the camel's back, that forces you to roll back? What will that be? And the other question is, very quickly, if you wouldn't mind, you have a good orbiter right now, and it's kind of obvious, but would you just say why you can't launch tomorrow?
Well, let's see, the timeline for the rollback, if we decide to head down the rollback path, that puts us clearly in a position to bring the vehicle off the pad. There are points in time over the next day or so where we can stop that process and stay out at the launch pad. The first major activity we go through is the PRSD offload. We would do that tomorrow on first shift. After that is ordnance disconnect. That's an intrusive job. You have to get into after the orbiter and disconnect that ordnance as well as other ordnance on the ship. That's an intrusive job. So we can decide before ordnance, have another call with the program and decide if we're ready to press on with ordnance. And then the final one is about noon on Tuesday, where we disconnect the major power and data feeds to the mobile launch platform out at the launch pad. Once we do that, then we're in a rollback scenario, and we come back to the VAB and see where the storm goes. Launching tomorrow, there's no chance of launching tomorrow given the configuration we're in. We have the OMBU, the orbiter mid-body umbilical unit, connected to the vehicle. That's a servicing panel for the fuel cells themselves. So that's all connected up with the expectation that we're going to detank. We wanted to get that work ahead of us. If we decide tomorrow morning not to detank and go for a launch attempt on Tuesday, we simply disconnect that and close out that area of the orbiter, and then the orbiter is fully back in the configuration it was probably Friday after PRSD load. And so we've taken conscious steps not to back out a launch account configuration any more than we have to in order to support the Tuesday attempt. But we would have to already have COM activation done for an attempt tomorrow. We chose today not to do that. And so there's no way that we could get to an attempt tomorrow, and the program accepts that, realizes that. We made we had those discussions with them last night. And so we knew last night that Tuesday was going to be our attempt day if we stay out the launch pad. So again, there are built-in time points in the rollback scenario where we can consciously decide not to take any more further action to deconfigure the ship and stay out there. It's well understood, and we would get together as a team and make those calls as we go through it.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Libya on the wall. Tracy?
Tracy Watson, USA Today for Leroy Kane. If you could spell out for us what kind of change in the track of the storm or the conditions of the storm would make you stop and say, okay, we're good to go on Tuesday. What would it take?
Okay. Tracy, the situation as it is, there's a certain set of conditions that are expected, as is true with most of these storms. In this case, it strikes me that the National Hurricane Center and all that goes into their forecasts, there seems to be less uncertainty in this storm. If we look at all the models that we've been looking at, there's very good agreement. And so there's a general sense that this storm is, the path of this storm, certainly for the next between 24 and 48 hours is about as certain as maybe can be or has ever been for a hurricane like this. That's my opinion based on having listened to and talked to the folks. The thing that we would have to see, frankly, to not head into rollback preparations would be some sort of significant change. And just as an example, there's a trough that's over the western part of the CONUS right now. I think it was over West Texas when we talked this afternoon. And that trough is expected to have a significant influence on this storm in terms of providing steering currents, if you will, and that's what's causing it, at least in part, to make this right turn. If, for example, tomorrow morning or by tomorrow morning, as we go throughout the night tonight and getting into the morning, something changes relative atmospherically, if something changes and the forecast experts and the hurricane experts come in and say that's not going to happen, we feel here's the reasons it's not going to happen. Instead of going right, the storm's going to go left, or it's going to continue on straight to the north. As with any update that we get, we have to consider and weigh in the trending. And I would ask Mike Lambach to comment on this as well. He has a tremendous wealth of experience with watching these storms here from this coast, and he may be able to offer more in the way of answering your question. But it would have to be something like that, to my mind's eye anyway, fairly significant, and it would have to occur between now and tomorrow morning. Mike?
Yeah, I'll be glad to try it. All of us that live on the coast of Florida are familiar with hurricanes and the tracks of them. I mean, that's just what we do. We do it for our homes, we do it for our families, and we do it out here as part of our business. One of the key things we all look at, and one of the key things I look at, is the trend of the storm. if you go back 3 or 4 days, Ernesto was prodded to go between Cuba and the Yucatan, and it stayed on that track fairly well over 3 or 4 days. It jogged slightly to the right. But then it started trending more and more to the right. It started going across the western tip of Cuba, then the western third of Cuba, then the center of Cuba. And so that trend has been going to the right for quite some time. It has never, as near as I remember all the tracks we've gotten, it has never jogged to the left. It's either stayed on track or is coming further to the right. And so in my mind, this storm probably won't jog to the left. And it's running out of time to turn more drastically to the right and miss us to the right. The number of storms that we tracked and watched over the years, this one, we're going to get some effects from this storm at the Kennedy Space Center. It remains to be seen how bad those effects are, and that's the risk trade we make when these storms threaten us. Do we stay at the pad and accept some amount of wind, or do we get do we expect to have those levels of winds that would harm the orbiter, and we have to roll back and protect her? So that's what we do, and it's really that trend that I rely on personally quite a bit, and also the model consistencies. If you look at a plot of all the models kind of laying on top of each other, they're very consistent over the next 24 to 36 hours. And even if you go out 2 days or so, they don't diverge very much. And so, again, for all of us that live in Florida, this looks like a storm that's fairly predictable. It would take something unusual, in my mind, frankly, to say that we wouldn't start the preps tomorrow. We have not yet committed to rolling back from the pad to the VAB. Again, those are decisions, incremental decisions we make during this next 24 hours or so.
Okay, thank you. Second row, Keith, with your hand up. Second row, please.
Keith Young, SOWatch.com for Mike Sefferdini. With regard to your question about the Russians, I'm a little confused because earlier Bill Gerstenmaier specifically said that your organization had been in regular contact with the Russians. Is it that you personally haven't been? And second of all, whether you or your organization talks to them, will you specifically raise the issue that you may ask them to consider changing their Soyuz flight plans if you go into a slip?
Yeah, I talked to my Russian counterparts probably almost every day of the week if it's not a weekend. And yes, those are conversations I have. However, this most recent occurrence, which we've been talking about today, implies that we may roll back. And if we roll back, it's highly likely that we will push the 7th, which is the close of our window. And so the discussions he told you we would be having late tonight and early tomorrow, and it would take us a couple days to sort through, are about just that. We've agreed that after the 7th that we would stand down and let them go fly and do the crew exchange, which would take them, if they launch on the 14th, they'll undock on the 25th. And so the question is, do we want to, once we start to better understand if we roll back, and if we roll back, when are we going to come back out, do we want to talk some more about the risk trade? And the risk trade, of course, is how late in the morning are we feel comfortable with the Soyuz crew landing from a search and rescue standpoint. So I haven't broached that subject with them, mostly because they've been asleep while we've been talking about this. Their day starts at about, generally their work day starts about 8:30 or 9, and I'm going to, we've left word that we would like to talk at 8:30, and they've confirmed that, 8:30 their time, so that'll be 12:30 tonight here. And that's when we'll begin discussion about whether there's, what we'll start to look at is, with each landing opportunity, if we were to push into that window, which rev do you land on, and then how late in the morning is that, or how early in the morning is that, and then what's the risk trade with that relative to trying to fly the shuttle in front of it and getting that work behind us. So up until then, we were comfortable that we could make this window. Today, it's starting to sound like maybe we won't, and so that's the new discussions that Bill referred to.
Okay, thank you. Second row, Warren. Okay.
Warren Lee, New York Times for Mike Langwell.
If you start a rollback, let's say noon or so Tuesday, you have a shuttle with the full cargo, a very heavy one. You have a crawler breakdown or a crawler problem. Do you have enough time there for some contingency to help yourself if you're kind of caught in between the pad and the VAB?
Well, again, as I said earlier, we protect for about 4 hours of contingency time in the rollback, and it's a hypothetical question about what sort of failures we might incur during the rollback. If it's a cracked shoe on the crawler transporter, those are relatively easy to change out in the order of an hour or so we can deal with those types of things. So I'd hate to speculate on other failures that would bump up against that 4 hours. But we do a full validation of the crawlers. We've done that today. In fact, I don't know if you saw them, but we have both crawlers out driving around this afternoon to validate both of them that they're ready to use. And so right now, crawlers are in great shape and would not expect a problem.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Kelly right here.
Hi, a quick one for Mike Leinbach. It's Kelly Young with New Scientist. How many hurricane-related rollbacks have you had in the history of the program?
Oh boy, I don't know the answer to that. Do you have it, David?
I just happen to have it. It's the data that we pulled in fairly quick fashion today said that we had 4 hurricane-related rollbacks. One of them was actually for a tropical storm, and then there were 3 in a row in the 95, 96 time frame. And I've got the exact dates and missions if you're interested in that. But it's on the order of 4.
And we do have that information at the press site as well. Okay, next question. Let's go back to the gentleman in the blue shirt.
Thank you. Greg Dobbs from HDNet Television. Would you mind elaborating on the Russians' concerns, the primary reasons why they can't easily make a decision to push back their launch of Soyuz so that we can use the window after September 6th or 7th?
It has to do with landing at night in Kazakhstan. If we, because of the way the orbital mechanics work out, as we push beyond the 18th, which is their last launch date that they planned for, as you push beyond that, they start landing earlier and earlier and earlier in the morning. If they launch on the 18th, they're protecting, if I recall right, don't hold me to, it's about 45 minutes before sunup. We have some experience with that and have agreed that's a reasonable risk. But if you stay on the same reb and you precess each day, you precess about 20 minutes into the morning, earlier and earlier. And so you get to a point where the search and rescue guys get a little uncomfortable. They're flying a number of helicopters at night to a spot somewhere in the steppes of Kazakhstan, hopefully where you expect them to be within a certain radius. They have beacons, they have communication devices. We have planes flying that can track them. But in spite of all that, you want to make sure you have the added benefit of visual on the spacecraft. And also it's just a safer way you're landing in the middle of the desert, and so you don't really know what's precisely at the spot you're going to land at. So the crew's going to land there, and then about 9 helicopters are going to try to land there. And so there's just all these things kind of add up after a while. You want to make sure that if at all possible you can do most of this work in daylight. And so that's the rationale. Again, what you start to lean on, though, is all these systems we have to track the spacecraft, the beacons. Since Increment 6 returned, we have an Iridium phone on board and a GPS system so that we can call and the crew can call and give us their GPS coordinates. And we've put a lot of systems on board to make sure that we have the capability. So we feel relatively confident that we could find the crew, but just doing it too early into the morning, so that there's too much nighttime, just adds that much more risk of you can't find them very long, and the crew might need some support from the team. I've had crews tell me they've come back and the most peaceful time they had was the time from landing, and they crawled out until the time the search and rescue guys showed up. So it just depends on what's going on. But if the crew is in distress, the sooner we can get to them, the better off they'll be. And so that's what you're trying to protect for.
Mm-hmm. In your considered opinion, and the opinion of the American team, is there a day or two, or are there more than that in terms of risk assessment, they could afford to slip back so that we could get our mission in?
Well, see, now this is the neat thing about the International Space Station is that's not the. Well, I'm not going to weigh whether or not what we, the U.S. wants to do is more important than what they want to do. It's an international crew, an international team. So the real question is the risk to the increment crew, the station crew, our crew, is that risk great enough for them landing earlier and earlier in the morning? Is it so great that I want to go ahead and stand down on 12A and wait for the lit opportunity for 12A? There is a need to get on with assembly, absolutely. There is some added risk with landing in the morning and at nighttime, and we're going to have to weigh that. My opinion is I think the system is fairly robust for night landings, but again, you're weighing a risk to the crew with the schedule to go fly, and that's an okay risk to make. That's an okay risk trade to make, but that's the risk trade to make. And so now you got to back up and go, we're responsible for shuttles. That whatever we're doing on shuttles, whether we're flying their crews, we're flying elements, whatever we're doing, we're responsible. And so it's up to us to say we feel comfortable. They're responsible for Soyuz. So a really big part of this is not my opinion on risk trade, but whether they're willing, whether they want to take that risk because they're ultimately responsible for the crew. And just like how we feel about protecting our crews, they feel the same way. So it'll be a discussion. That's what we do. We'll have a nice discussion about that, and I really couldn't tell you where we'll end up. We might have, sometimes as you precess, you also pick a different rev, and if you pick a different rev, you might buy back some time. So that's one of the things we'll talk about. Is there another rev we can land at that'll get us a little closer to to sunrise? And those are the kinds of things we'll talk about. And if we can't do that, we'll talk about when would I fly the shuttle right after the Soyuz leaves to see how quickly I can get that done. And of course, I don't have a lot of flexibility there because the lit opportunities are after about the 20th of October, and they're pretty short. So, but we'll talk about what we would do with the crew, and because we have to rearrange their whole plan if we're going to fly the next crew and then bring 12A up. So that we're going to have both of those kinds of conversations.
Okay, thank you. Since it's approaching 9 o'clock and we've had a long day, I'll take one more question and then we'll wrap it up. Stephen?
Stephen Young with spaceflightnow.com for Leroy. I'm just wondering what the mood of the team is. You're so close to a very important mission with not a lot of time in which to launch in, and then Mother Nature comes along and deals you these blows. Is there a sense of frustration? How could you describe the team's feelings going into facing this problem?
You know, I would have to say that based on the way the team worked through the weekend here on this issue that we had with the lightning strike, and really came through with flying colors in terms of the effort that was put forward. And in the end, we're able to clear the vehicle. I think they feel very good about it. One of the things about this team, and I'm beginning to learn this more and more, is it's a very resilient team. And so while I'm sure there's disappointment if we have to go into rollback preps tomorrow, and that's not why we're here. We are here to go launch the space shuttle. I mean, that is why all of our friends and colleagues have traveled here for these final preparations and reviews. I mean, that's what we're about. So yes, there's disappointment. I'm disappointed, but I'm also very proud of the team for being able to get to this point. And the other thing I would tell you is that if you do this long enough, you begin to understand that where the weather is concerned for launch and landing, we have to set ourselves up to give ourselves the best chance to take advantage of good weather when we have good weather. And you have to, at the same time, understand there are going to be a lot of days when we don't have good weather. And these hurricane situations factor into that, of course. So I think all in all, the team feels very good about where we are. Everybody would like to be able to get to a launch attempt on Tuesday, and that is where the team is heading right now. And if we have to begin rollback preps tomorrow, we will do that. And if that's where we end up, then we will we'll press down as far as we can and make decisions as we go. And even in that case, if we have to roll back ultimately and leave the pad, the team understands that, and they understand that for us to get to the mission, we've got to protect the assets. And you know, none of this is easy. And I've said it before, and I would say it again. And if it was easy, anybody can do it, and probably everybody would be doing it. So this is just another aspect of what we do that's very challenging. And so the team's in great spirits, I would tell you, in short. And we talked a lot about at the end of the MMT today. We talked a lot about our forward schedule and allowing folks to have enough time to make plans to get back home for a couple of days and spend some time with their families, so that in the event that we prepare for rollback and then we don't roll back, we can maybe, as Mike explained, get to the end of the week here and still have a launch opportunity. And this team is in great shape.
Okay, great.